Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris and I have in hand all of the brand new LEGO Ninjago Summer 2025 sets. This has been a really interesting wave, combining the Ninjago Legends Monstrosity sets alongside the Dragons Rising Season 3 Part 2 sets. Now this video is coming out a little bit later than usual because LEGO actually forgot to send us a couple of these sets. I managed to obtain them separately, but I'm only now being able to pull them all together into a mega review. So apologies for the delay, and without further ado, let's jump into a look at every single one of the Summer 2025 LEGO Ninjago offerings. The good, the bad, and the pricey. It's August 1st, and that means there are a ton of brand new LEGO Ninjago sets available for sale right now in the US. If you live anywhere outside of the US, these have been available since June. But I figured now was the perfect time to put out a mega review given that they are now available for pretty much anybody anywhere in the world to purchase. The entire summer wave of LEGO Ninjago is a pretty interesting one. Two of the sets are Ninjago Legends Monstrosity sets. It's a brand new lineup of sets focused on older teens, which is confirmed to continue into next year, although it probably will focus on a different type of media other than Monstrosity, and they are absolutely fantastic. That being said, it means that technically, as far as the Season 3 Part 2 sets are concerned, this is a bit of a smaller wave story-wise because two of the big set slots are taken up by sets that are unrelated to storytelling for the new season. I definitely have a lot of thoughts on how they did this wave. Pros and cons, and I feel like a lot of that boils down to distribution of the minifigures. I'm going to end this video by taking a closer look at all of the minifigures as a group and talk through my thoughts on the distribution, but to kind of give a spoiler warning here, I'm honestly not the biggest fan of many of the ninjas' original outfits, like for instance, Nia in the Ghost Hunter suit being exclusive to the largest set of the wave. And it's also very strange how characters like Lloyd and Sora are exclusive to two sets, but they come together, meaning that if you're trying to collect all the minifigures, you don't really have a lot of options to get those particular characters. There's just a couple of oddities like that that make this wave stand out to me as having one of the strangest minifigure distributions. 3 copies of some members of the Forbidden Five and then only 1 copy of others certainly doesn't help a ton, but other than that, I will say the minifigures are absolutely phenomenal, and this wave does have some of my favorite Ninjago sets, maybe ever. Lloyd's transforming jet mech was one that absolutely took me by surprise. It's a phenomenal build with one of the coolest transformation features I've ever seen in really any LEGO set ever, and it was not a set that was really on my radar until I had it in hand and played with it, and then I realized just how cool it was to play around with it, which is no big surprise because it was designed by legendary at this point LEGO Ninjago designer Lee Chi-wing, but it still is something I really wanted to highlight in this review as being one of the standouts of the wave. Of course, it is really cool to get a new bounty again as well, and I definitely have some thoughts on how the bounty was done. I certainly wish that it was done a little bit closer to how we saw it in the show with a much larger dragon head, but I do still think it is a very good set. There are a couple of slightly overpriced entries in my opinion, like the Ninja Combat vehicle here. It's certainly not as overpriced as some of the previous combo vehicles we've gotten, looking at last year's in particular, but I still do wish this model was a bit more substantial for what you get. That being said, this wave still has some phenomenal highlights. Honestly, if I look at last year's summer wave compared to this one, it's very hard for me to pick a favorite. Last year's wave had some absolutely beautiful sets like Cole's Titan mech, the Source Dragon of Motion, as well as of course the Tournament Temple City, but then this year we have the amazing Fire Knight mech, which has pretty much the same articulation as Cole's Titan mech but in a smaller package, plus a beautiful display stand, and of course that phenomenal Guardian Dragon. To me, both of these waves are very neck and neck, but honestly, I feel like this year's summer wave just barely edges out last year's as being a little bit better because it does have some phenomenal builds, but it also really has some new things as well. I feel like Ninjago is trying out new things in this wave and they're all working, such as the transforming jet mech and of course the entire Legends sub-theme, spearheaded with the Guardian Dragon, which I feel has gone past the Ninjago fandom. And a lot of people who aren't even fans of Ninjago at all are loving this set and picking it up, which is always a very good sign, which shows the theme is really growing past its original roots. And so, throughout this video, we are going to jump into individual looks at every single one of the sets, from smallest to largest, and I will put timestamps in the description if you want to jump to any one particular review. We're going to end by taking a look at all of the minifigures together. I'll speak a bit to the minifigure distribution I alluded to just earlier, and of course, we will wrap up with my final thoughts on the value, benefit of the builds, and just overall feelings on this wave as a whole. And so, with that, let's go ahead and jump on into the first set in this mega review, the smallest set of the wave, which kind of brings Ninjago back to its roots with a dual motorcycle battle. Alright, here is the smallest set of the Dragons Rising Season 3 Part 2 wave. It's 71838 Kai's Motorcycle Speed Race. It retails for $10 or 10 euros and comes with 79 pieces. This to me is the most traditional classic Ninjago set out of the entire wave. It's literally just two motorcycles. There was a time when Ninjago was kind of getting very repetitive by always giving us very similar motorcycles, $10 motorcycles here and there, a motorcycle chase set, and honestly we haven't gotten one of these in a while. So it kind of makes sense that LEGO decided just to pull one out of their bag of old tricks and give us a classic two-person motorcycle set. Honestly, I feel like with the context of the show, it would have made a lot more sense to have this set be featuring different characters, and I don't want to spoil the episodes because they technically haven't been officially released yet, but then again, when this set was being designed, there was no way for the designers to know that. So just wanting to evaluate the set on its own, I think it honestly is okay for what it is. It's not really trying to do anything revolutionary or special, but it is just providing a small little bit of conflict in a box, which is going to be really good for young kids to be able to get their own versions of the characters, a hero, and a villain to face off. Kai is actually really nicely outfitted in this set. Sometimes for $10 sets, they tend to remove armor pieces or make the minifigures a little worse than the standard set versions, but thankfully, they did not do that for this version of Kai. He has the full-on armor, and we'll take a closer look at the minifigure in a second. Despite the size of the bikes, they really did try to differentiate the two bikes. The hero one for Kai here has much larger wheels. It feels more kind of like an off-road style of bike that is suitable for rough terrain. I actually really appreciate how the headlight here does kind of look like it almost is covering part of the wheel, like it arcs right into the wheel, if you know what I mean. So it's very, very tight in the way that it's built. You've got two sides on each end to add that Ninjago flavor, but otherwise it is a very basic build for a bike. It's just using the relatively newer style of motorcycle wheel containment pieces that they introduced just a few years back. The Spectral Dragonian bike, on the other hand, is a lot more slim and low profile. It's using smaller tires, which makes sense. It feels a little bit faster as a vehicle. It feels a lot more streamlined, and I appreciate the inclusion of the Eternal's curved blade elements on the sides that really feel like ghostly trails going onto the side of the bike. Unfortunately, because of the low profile, the Dragonian standing on top of the bike does look a little bit awkward compared to the bulkier Kai bike, but I think it works well for what it is. Obviously, this is not really a canon vehicle. The Spectral Dragonians are not really using any vehicles, but I think it makes sense as just kind of a creative sort of thing for kids to play with and get a chance to play around with a villain motorcycle vehicle of their own. Personally, I think it would have been maybe a little bit more interesting if this was some sort of a mini dragon or something to chase the bike, but I also do totally get the appeal of just having a double bike motorcycle set. So definitely for story reasons, I think it would have been cool to have something a bit different and give some variety, but as a just standard kids playset, I completely understand why it is just two motorcycles. As it is, I appreciate how they do have their own unique color schemes. Utilizing that aqua color for the Dragonians does look really good, and I do appreciate how each bike feels very different. That being said, there's honestly not that much I actually have to say about this set. It's a $10 set. Honestly, I don't really have much cause to complain about the price. We've gotten a lot of $10 double bike battle sets in Ninjago's history, and this one really is no different. The bikes do feel a little small. I would say they're just a step above a standard polybag build, but then again, most polybags are $5 or $6, so to have two very detailed minifigs, I think that would have been good. In case folks are curious, that's what Aaron looks like while driving the bike, and I think he does fit very nicely because it does have sort of that flame yellowish orange color scheme, but honestly, it would have been really cool to get a bike set with, say, Aaron and Roz, or even Aaron and Sora just driving similar bikes, going alongside exploring the lands, and I think that would have been a cool set to get, especially for a cheaper offering, but it is still nice to get it for Kai and a Dragonian. Taking a look at the minifigures, this is our spectral suit version of Kai. He is utilizing a brand new armor piece, which is really nicely done. I love the bamboo style aesthetics on one side, the dragon head on the other, the fact that it's dual molded so you can see the pupils in the dragon eyes and a very large mask on the front of the face. The only downside is that much like the other Dragons Rising masks, there is no way to turn the head. You cannot pose your minifigures when they're wearing the armor piece pieces like this. And so I actually had to commit the cardinal sin of LEGO minifigures and chop off the front of the mask for Kai and Cole because I had 2 extra copies of them, because it just doesn't really make sense to me to have the mask be built into the armor. I understand why they do it. They are trying to come up with a system of armor pieces and to make it compatible with different types of upper hoods. Don't worry, I totally get that and I understand why they're doing it. I'm just not the biggest fan of the system because I really do enjoy being able to pose my minifigures, and it is a big damper on posability. With the armor removed, you can see that all of the ninja are sporting some dark tan and dark red designs, which looks pretty nice. I like the more haphazard kind of drawing of the logo on the back, almost like it's painted on, as well as the hanging tassel on the front of the torso. I think it definitely is just something that makes these ninja suits feel more unique. You've also got that sort of elemental design in the orange on the front of the torso. It almost looks like a wave of fire, so altogether, these suits are actually doing quite a lot in terms of having their own visual identity, yet also feeling like they are part of one lineup of suits. They're maybe some of my favorite suits we've gotten in Ninjago in a long time. I definitely love the armor pieces, and again, just wish you could turn the heads. In terms of the Spectral Dragonian, the villain for this set, I actually really love the way that they have made the Dragonians feel very unique and different compared to the first half of the year iteration. It's certainly a big improvement over last year's, which basically just took the Wolf Mask Warriors, added some claws in the back, and made them purple. These feel like very, very different figures, and I really appreciate how much effort was put into the design of them. You've got this one with transparent blue legs, always cool to get transparent minifig pieces, transparent arms as well. I like the swords they're using as blades, and the design, which showcases some sort of a creepy looking kind of evil Thunderfang-like skull on the front of the torso, is very cool. I also really appreciate the dark blue armor and gunmetal gray helmet. I just think it's a really nice touch for a minifigure like this. The only downside is that honestly it is a little bit strange to come from the first half of the year, which had the Dragonians almost every single set featuring wings, and then these ones which almost always do not have the wings. It just feels like something is missing. Still, it is very cool to get that specialized print with the Forbidden Five or Evil Thunderfang symbol on the back of the head. You can kind of use your own imagination and pretend it's maybe breathing out some magic or something like that by reversing the head, and I do like how they have given you that option as an alternate design, but altogether, color scheme wise, red, transparent blue, and light aqua is such a cool color scheme for these minifigs, and I'm definitely a big fan of this villain faction. But with that, we have summed up my early look at Kai's Motorcycle Speed Race. Super basic set, honestly not much that I have to say about this one other than it is nice to have a fully outfitted version of Kai in a smaller $10 set. I'm sure a lot of folks are going to be really happy about getting that minifigure in particular, and it's also good to get some villain representation, especially because we rarely ever get villain-focused vehicles nowadays. And honestly, while this wave doesn't really give us that much in terms of the villain faction, it is still good to get a little bit of crumbs of representation from the villain side of things when we're actually putting the wave together in stuff like this.
That's all for this review, so now let's move on to the next set.
Okay, this is 71839 Aaron's Spinjitzu Battle Mech. It comes with 213 pieces and retails for $23 or 20 euros, and it comes with Aaron in kind of a hybrid between his regular suit, except this one has his hair showing with a half mask, one of these spectral Dragonian warriors, unfortunately without wings but with a ghost tail, and Baby Ryu, for some reason, clearly showing that LEGO wasn't quite ready to give up Baby Ryu when he started to grow up, and they still wanted to get their most out of the merchandise for Ryu, which I totally understand. It's a really cute mold. This is meant to be compatible with the previous Elemental mechs, although unfortunately, it's a few dollars more than what they retailed for just last year. The other standalone Elemental mechs like Cole's and Soar's and even Lloyd's retailed for $20, whereas this one is a bit more expensive. Taking a look at the build as a whole, I actually really like the composition of this build. Something really cool that the mechs are doing this particular wave, much like Jade or Rogue's mech from his Mech Dragon Jockey, is that they're basically large-scale versions of the minifigure, and this is pretty much the same thing. You have a big side of the armor on the side left arm to really showcase this black cloth kind of draped around the mech itself, and then the other arm is a little bit under armored because that is actually in tune with the minifigure. He has one black arm and one flame yellowish orange arm, and they really tried to have that come across in the build for this set, which is something I really think is one of the coolest aspects of having these asymmetrical details on the character. He does have these wings on the back of the mech as well, which which honestly, I don't really know if they add that much to the build. I feel like they were just included to make him stand apart from some of the other mechs, but I do actually like the choice of weapons here. You've got one hook, which is in tune with his sort of grapple hook aesthetic, and then you have just a standard sword on the other end of the arm. There's even a spot for baby Ryu to be attached to the side arm of the mech, which is a nice touch. Altogether, there's honestly not that much else I can say about the mech. Articulation is fairly limited, and one of my bigger complaints about these mechs remains the fact that the hands themselves are attached to the arms. So basically, you can't really get any extra articulation out of the posing of the blades, because the hands themselves are just an extension of the lower arms, as you can see. The legs are a little bit better in the fact that you can actually move around each and every individual foot, but I also will say that the feet themselves are pretty limited in articulation. Because of the way the feet are constructed, you can't really bend them forwards, which means that if you want to try to do a walking pose, you're not going to be that successful because one foot is always going to be off the ground the more you pull it back. The cockpit itself is built up pretty much the same as many of the other mechs. You can open up the cockpit here, showcase Aaron sitting down in the mech itself. It's very, very open, and it actually looks a little bit odd from, say, certain angles like the top down, because it feels like there's just so much empty space on the top of the cockpit there, but honestly, from the front, it doesn't look that bad. And I do like the addition of the transparent pink highlights that kind of tie into the Lord Raz style of color scheme. One thing I appreciate about vehicles like this is weapon storage. There are two clips on the back of the upper arms for storage for the prismatic blades that Aaron wields, which is quite nice. And then again, you can see how the design of the minifigure directly influenced the style of the mech. You have some fur-like elements on one side of the arm to showcase the very heavily armored up or almost pauldron covered arm on one side, and then you have a plainer side on the other, and I really appreciate how they wanted to build that into the design of the mech. Overall, for a relatively cheaper set, this is a pretty decent build. I will say that, honestly, it's not the most interesting of the brand new LEGO Ninjago sets. I definitely feel like a lot of the other ones that try new things are certainly just more interesting than this $23 mech, but it is quite nice to get one for Aaron, especially because he is one of the main characters for Ninjago Dragons Rising, and I'm actually really glad they decided to hold off and give him this one for his darker suit this year in 2025, because I feel like it made for a much more interesting mech. The golden knee pads are maybe the only thing about the build that I feel are a little bit out of place. I always like just a little bit of tasteful gold in sets like this, and it feels a little overwhelming for me to have those giant gold knee pads. I would have preferred something maybe even like black or just a darker shade to use for that color scheme, but honestly, everything else is pretty decent. There's not much else to say about it. It's a fun enough toy to play with. Could have used more articulation though. Moving on to the minifigs, this is going to be pretty quick because Aaron himself is just in the same exact outfit that he's worn for the first half of this year. It is a really nice outfit. I like how it has these kind of broken straps and the black color scheme to it integrated in. It's a really interesting design. But this time, he doesn't have his armor piece and horns, he just has a half mask in his hair. It's a nice way to get Aaron's hairpiece if you didn't own it already, but honestly, I definitely prefer having the horns on the minifigure, although I understand that for this particular set, it wouldn't have made sense because the armor wouldn't have allowed him to fit very nicely in the mech, so it's not that bad of a deal. He does just have the same face as usual though. Moving onwards to the next minifigure here, this is one of these Spectral Dragonians. This one does come with a ghost trail instead of the legs, and the ghost trail is actually recolored to have a transparent blue and kind of this lighter aqua color scheme, which is nice. I also like the transparent arms being used as well. The new color scheme for the Spectral Dragonians is one that really works for me. I like how you have the dark blue armor and gunmetal gray helmets. It just feels like a more interesting color scheme than even what we got earlier this year. I will say though that it is a bit unfortunate that these Dragonians don't have the wings, especially when so many of the standard form Dragonians did have the full-on wing appendages when we got them earlier this year. It's really weird that we only get literally one regular Dragonian with wings in the spectral form this year. It only comes in the J-Jockey set, and everything else is just only partially armored. The decal for the Forbidden 5 or Thunderfang style of symbol on the back of the head is a really nice touch though. I think it looks really good even when reversed if you want to imagine that they're breathing some sort of spectral energy. Nothing like what you would see in the show, but you know, you can use your imagination there, and I do appreciate that they do have that option. And overall, it's a really cool villain color scheme, just missing the wings. Altogether, for $23, I think this set is just okay. It's not one of the more exciting sets, but I think it fulfills its purpose as an Aaron mech, and I do appreciate how they did try to do new things by having it at least mimic the color scheme and the composition of the build of the minifig itself. I think that that is one of the cooler aspects of the mech, and when you compare it to Cole's or Sora's or Kai's, it really does feel like this is an upscaled version of the character, which I do appreciate. But I don't really appreciate the price increase. $3 extra is altogether not that much, but it does show that Ninjago sets are getting a little more expensive for what they are, and honestly, I felt like $20 was the perfect price point for a set like this, and it's unfortunate to see that slowly climb upwards, even just 1 year to the next.
That's all for this review, so now let's move on to the next set.
Okay, this is 71843 Rogue's Mech Dragon Rider, also known as the J-Jockey. It comes with 584 pieces and retails for a rather high $75 US and 70 euros. It also comes with 4 minifigs, one of which is exclusive to the set in the form of Rox, a member of the Forbidden Five and the Elemental Master of Fear. It also comes with Rogue, who we saw in the January wave, although this time he is without armor because he has to fit in the mech, a Spectral Dragonian Warrior complete with a full set of wings and ghostly tail, and the black suit version of Aaron wielding one of the new reveal blades for this summer. The set depicts a mech riding a mechanical dragon, which is a pretty unique concept. We haven't really seen that before, even though we have been seeing a lot of mech riding different vehicles in the past few years. We started with Kai's Mech Bike Rider, which was a mech riding a motorcycle. Earlier this year, we had Kai's Mech Storm Rider, which was a mech riding some sort of a jet, and now we have Jay's mech riding a mechanical dragon, so at least this time they're kind of switching things up. The one interesting thing I like about the set is that the dragon itself doesn't feel like a traditional Ninjago dragon. It feels almost like a raptor from Jurassic Park or some sort of a chicken-like character, which is why a lot of people have taken to calling this the J-Jockey, because it really does look like he's sitting on top of some sort of a chicken or dinosaur-like dragon hybrid, which is actually something I really like about the set. I like that it tries to do something new compared to a lot of the other dragons we have gotten from Ninjago before. All that to be said though, the actual build itself is honestly not the most interesting thing. It's very, very basic in the way it's constructed, pretty much just studs on either side. It just has a curve upwards for studs on the side for the front, which I think is nice, but there really isn't that much articulation that you can get out of it. That being said, despite the limited articulation, you can actually get this in pretty dynamic poses, as you just saw. The wings and being able to move the claws on the ends of the wings definitely do help a lot. And taking a look at the headpiece, they have recolored the Ninjago core dragon headpiece, this time in white and transparent yellow, to allow for a more lightning-like design, as well as introduced the smoke trail or ghost trail smoke elements for Ninjago Dragons Rising Season 3 Part 2 in transparent yellow, and this is the only set they come in that color. I actually really like the placement of these pieces. They feel like smoke contrails coming out of the mouth as it's roaring. You can almost imagine electricity shooting out of the mouth itself, and it's a really interesting design. I do appreciate it. The one thing I'm not the biggest fan of though is whenever Ninjago uses these large pre-molded dragon elements but without really any sort of brick-built head to go along with them. This one isn't quite as bad as some other instances because I guess it is supposed to be robotic and mechanical, so I can sort of excuse the Exoforce robot arms being used, but it is very unfortunate that in order to move the head around, it is very, very easy to accidentally get the jaw out of place. As you can see here, it's kind of swinging back and forth all over the place, and it's really easy just to get things misaligned, and it really just takes a little bit of extra effort to make sure everything's lined up. Add to the fact that the socket is on the bottom jaw, so moving the upper jaw will just cause it to get misaligned even more, and I just really wish they did a building technique similar to what we've seen in other LEGO Ninjago sets, using some of these same pieces like Lloyd's legendary dragon, which had a whole brick-built exterior to kind of go around the molded heads. Although designers have stated that is usually an unnecessary use of budget, because if they can get away with just using a couple of pieces to attach the jaws, then they should do that and spend the rest of the budget on the rest of the sets. So I understand it, but it's just something I did want to call out. Removing the mech though, we can take a look at the dragon on its own, and here it really does get that sort of raptor-like stance. The two long back legs, the shorter upper arms, but this time it has the wings on the sides of the arms as well, and I actually do like the vinyl elements being used for the wings here. I think it is actually pretty well done. Taking a look at the articulation of the build, it doesn't have quite as much articulation as you'd think. There are dual ball joints, but those cannot rotate back and forth, so you can only sway the feet side to side, and while you can move the legs backwards and forwards and splay them outwards, there's honestly not that much you can do with the legs because the feet themselves are fixed. That being said, you can actually articulate the fingers. They are all mounted on mixel joints for the hands themselves as well, so you can actually get this into some interesting poses despite the lack of articulation. And that's something I do appreciate. You really have to work with the articulation that you have given to you, but you can get it in some sort of a crouching pose. Imagine that it's stalking some sort of enemy down here, or you can have it stand all the way straight up, have the wings be furled outwards, and it really does give you a good range of dynamic motion, even though there really are only just a couple of articulation points. It helps that the wings are mounted on ball joints, so you can kind of angle them pretty much any direction you want, and I like the addition of the jet engines on the sides of the wings as well. I feel like those just add a little bit of character and extra detail to the mech. Altogether, the color scheme of dark blue, light gray, and white with a hint of yellow is actually really well done. I like it as an electricity-themed color scheme, and overall, the mech dragon itself is pretty decent. I ended up liking this a lot more than I initially thought, especially when I first saw images of the set. I wasn't really that keen on it, but when I built it myself, I realized that this is actually quite a lot of fun, and it is pretty nice in flight as well. Moving on to the mech, let's take a look at Rogue's mech, and this is pretty much just using the standard core mech template, but I will say this might actually be the best one we have gotten from Ninjago yet, and a lot of that has to do with the construction of the way the arms are done, with the addition of a pauldron. I think a pauldron, as I mentioned in my review of the Fire Knight mech, some sort of a cape element on robots or mechs always makes them 1,000 times cooler, and that absolutely is the case here. I really like how you have this Rogue and J sort of symbol on the side of the pauldron there, and the rest of the build really mimics the design of the minifig as well. I also like how the shoes are utilizing these traditional Japanese style sandals, something that we did see back in the Combiner mech with Lloyd and Aaron for Dragon's Rising Season 1 at a much larger scale, but one that actually really does work for a smaller mech like this. As I just mentioned, the design of the mech really mimics the design of the Rogue minifigure, and that's another thing I love about this set. It almost feels like a scaled up version of Rogue, and you're about to find out why in a second. The only downside, which is pretty much the same downside as most of these core style of mechs, is that you can't articulate the hands, so the weapon is a little bit awkward to pose. You can't really have it angled outwards or angled to the side. You really just have to move them with the side of the arms, because the hands are just attached to the lower arms. There really is no delineation between them, and that's definitely something that I wish was improved about these models, but then again, I definitely understand why they didn't do it. Every single time you include a joint in a LEGO set, the budget internally does go up, and also it makes it a little bit harder for kids to play around and pose if you have more joints. So especially since this is aimed at younger kids, I can see why they chose not to do it, and it poses okay without it. Comparing this to the Rogue minifigure though, I do really want to point out it actually is really cool, because on Rogue you can see that he has this dark tan sort of cloth going around his arm. There isn't any sort of piece to represent it, there's no fabric, but you do have it brick built into the minifigure mech itself, which I think is a really nice touch. It just adds so much character to the mech, and it makes it distinctly a Rogue mech and not even just a regular J Lightning mech like we would have gotten in the past. This is very distinctly a different type of color scheme for J in his Rogue disguise. You've got the dark blue figured in, you've got the dark tan highlights for the cloth all around his mech, and altogether it is a really nice design. There's even a spot to hold the weapon. The way it attaches onto the dragon here is also super simple. There's just a series of clips underneath the mech, right in between the legs, and you just go ahead and attach it up to the saddle here. It just clicks right on, and it's super easy. There you go. Rogue is now riding his mech. You want me to fight the dragon? Rogue jockey! That is what it is, right there. Rogue is riding the dragon. So altogether, what do I think of this set? Honestly, I genuinely think this set is a lot of fun to play with. I ended up liking this set a lot more after building it than I initially thought I would after first seeing images. The big problem with this set is the price. $75 is frankly ridiculous for a set like this. It doesn't really matter to me that it does include a really cool minifig in the form of rocks as well as the Spectral Dragonian. All that matters is, am I getting enough value out of what I pay for this set? And the answer is a decided no. Even if it was $70, I would say that is way too high. 584 pieces, yes, some of them are vinyl elements, but for what you get, having this in hand, it does not feel more than $50. Maybe 55, and at best 60, but 75 is kind of ridiculous for this. It's not the most ridiculously priced set of the wave. Unfortunately, that prize will go to a set with less pieces than this one, which either we've reviewed already or we're going to be reviewing very soon. But it is just a little disappointing that I feel like a very decent set like this might get hit because $75 is so much to pay for it. It looks so good in flight, it is genuinely fun to play with. I like the color scheme and how the dragon is a different color scheme than the mech. Altogether, it's a really fun toy, but that price is just not justifiable, and even though this was sent to me for free by LEGO, I have to give my honest review of the set, and I feel like I can't quite recommend it at the full price point. It's a good set, just not $75 good. With that, I do want to spend some time to look at the minifigures at the end of the review, like always. We have seen this version of Aaron a lot of times before. He first appeared in the March wave of sets, and technically this suit torso design appeared in the January wave, so it's nothing necessarily new, but it is interesting to get another version of Aaron in his black suit. And the accessories in the form of the lantern and the reveal blade are quite nice as well. Moving on to the newer minifigures in the set though, I do want to focus in on the Spectral Dragonian Warrior. This is actually one of the only sets that does give you a full-on Spectral Dragonian Warrior complete with wings. It's actually really weird how that doesn't appear in full form in really any of the other sets. Technically we get Tyr, but Tyr has a specialized different colored skull, so that one doesn't really count in Lloyd's jet mech, and all the other versions of this character don't have the dragon on the back, so this is technically the only one that is accurate to the show, which is really strange, especially coming off of the first half of the year where all the Dragonians were fully armored up. That being said, I certainly cannot complain because this is a really well done minifigure. It makes me wish that all of the Dragonians came with all of these full-on pieces with the dragon. If you have any of the previous one half of the year sets, you know exactly how these Dragonians work. You have this sort of fire-like design on the back, this time showcasing the logo of the Forbidden Five, as well as the Dragonian face, and then you have a dark blue recolor of the Dragonian armor. You've got the helmet on the top there, which also can kind of double as the skull, the dragon, which separates from the back, but we don't see those separate in the show. Those are basically just supposed to be their wings in the show, and altogether, it's a really well done figure. I actually love the integration of the transparent elements, and I really appreciate the fact that they did decide to give them brand new headpieces this time around, as opposed to what we got last year for the Wolf Mask Warriors. When they got a new color redesign, we just had the same headpieces. So these do feel all new. And I like the variation as well. Some of them have legs, some of them have ghost tails, and that is reflected in the show as well. It also has a flag which has a Thunderfang-like design, which can be showcased with the reveal blade here. The way the gimmick of the sets works is much like LEGO Explorians or LEGO Alpha Team Deep Freeze. You basically hold this transparent red piece over your lens here, and you can see some sort of a hidden symbol which becomes apparent only when looking through a red lens. It's very obvious what the symbol is supposed to be even without the reveal blade, but I like that it does add a little bit of extra interactivity to the way that these minifigures are set up. Rogue himself is a tad of a downgrade compared to his previous iterations that we've seen both in the January wave of this year, as well as in the Temple Bounty, the larger set of the wave, because this time he doesn't have his shoulder armor. That's for a reason though, and that's because his shoulder armor would not allow him to fit cleanly in the mech, so they decided to remove the shoulder armor for this version of the figure, just give us the standard Rogue minifigure by itself, which is an alright compromise. I still love the design of this figure. It is one of my favorite Ninjago minifigures to come out this year. I just think it's really remarkably well produced, and the long weapon is quite nice as well. It kind of mimics the weapon that the mech holds in the set, which is another thing I didn't call out when reviewing the mech. They really did try to make it feel like it is just a large upscaled version of Jay, which I think is super cool. And that's the headpiece he gets underneath, pretty neat, but it also would have been cool to get a hairpiece too for at least one of these sets, given that he has a very unique hairpiece in the show. And finally, we have Rox, the Elemental Master of Fear and co-leader of the Forbidden Five alongside Noct. Rox is a great minifigure. It's actually our first Ninjago minifigure to feature mid-legs, which is a really interesting design choice for a villain to actually have the mid-legs, but I guess it shows that the Forbidden Five aren't all the same. Rox is a member of the Wolf Clan, plan, and that's not immediately obvious by the headpiece. They chose not to give us molded heads for the Forbidden 5, which I guess makes sense because that would have added a lot of extra cost to producing them, but she does have a really nice print on an orange head. That wasn't really what I was expecting. The orange feels a little bright compared to what we've seen in the show, but I guess it kind of works. I just kind of was expecting maybe like a brighter light orange or something a bit of a lighter shade, but I do love that head print. The mask is very menacing, and I love how the torso design is done as well. You've almost got these kind of terrified looking faces alongside the kimono there, which really is keeping in tune with the elemental master of fear. If only we were to see the element of fear used in the show, because I don't think it's ever going to be used. Altogether, though, it's a really great minifigure, and it's great to finally be able to complete the Forbidden 5. I have a lot of thoughts on the distribution of these figures. I don't think this should have been exclusive to one set. I really do feel like they should have made the distribution a little bit nicer for the Forbidden 5, but I'll save those thoughts when we talk about the minifigures as a whole for this wave. As of right now, Rox is easily the highlight minifig of the set, and for good reason. It's a major new villain that we have seen throughout the course of Dragons Rising, even throughout Season 2 near the end of it, so it's very cool to get her as a minifigure finally. And with that, we have summed up our look at Rogue's Mech Dragon Rider. This is a very mixed set for me. It's genuinely a lot of fun to play with, but the price just keeps me from being able to recommend it. Still, there are a lot of things to love about the set. I like the lightning contrails along the side of the mouth, the way the color scheme contrasts really nicely from the dragon to the mech, the dark tan integrated into the mech, the pauldron on the mech looks so cool as well. There's a lot of really neat elements here. And this, of course, has been designed by Li Chi-wing, one of the best designers on the Ninjago team today, who is also responsible for some of the greatest Ninjago sets, just like the Source Dragon of Motion and even the Dragonstone Shrine. So Ninjago is in very, very good hands with this designer. Altogether, this is a really nice and fun thing to play with, but the price just is not worth it for me.
That's all for this review, so now let's move on to the next set. Here is set number 71842, Ronto the Master Dragon. It contains 381 pieces and for whatever reason retails for $50 and 45 euros. It is part of the summer wave of LEGO Ninjago sets and one of the last sets that we have to review in the main lineup. In terms of minifigures, the set contains one member of the Forbidden 5, this fraud Zark, as well as Lloyd, Sora, and Wildfire. It's a bit annoying that Lloyd and Sora only come together in two sets, so if you own one, you're going to get both figures again, but obviously the main focus here is Ronto, and honestly this set raises a lot of questions for me. We first saw Ronto at the beginning of last year as one of the two Dragon Masters, and while we got Egalt in January 2024, it's taken us until June of 2025 to get his counterpart, and I have to wonder if the show model was designed first and then they made the set, or what exactly happened during the development of this set to make it be so late. The thing is, despite it coming out so much later than the introduction of the character, the set barely resembles the animated counterpart. It's honestly not that bad of a dragon by itself, but it really just doesn't look like Ronto in the show. So I just personally have a lot of questions as to how exactly this set was developed. But let's take a look at the set holistically and try to separate it from the animated counterpart for now. The set itself is honestly an okay dragon build. It doesn't necessarily do anything new, and I certainly feel like there are probably some improvements that could have been made to just make it feel a bit more dynamic in its shaping, but I do actually like how the color scheme is very unique compared to most Ninjago dragons that we've gotten in the past. Dark blue, purple, and even a little bit of pink for the wings and the horns is not really a color scheme that we've seen from a Ninjago dragon, and I do appreciate them trying to do something new with this set. It almost feels more like a LEGO Elves dragon to me than a Ninjago one, and there are definitely pros and cons that come with it. But before we get into the main build of the dragon, let's take a quick look at the side build included in the set. The side build here is a little bit of a gimmick for the reveal blade to showcase a symbol. It's pretty much just a small little Thunderfang or Dragonian themed little statue here, and clearly has been something just added onto the set just to make it be in theme with the rest of the wave, which also makes me beg the question as to why exactly we're getting this set now. Showcasing the reveal blade reveals some sort of a dragon-like face. It's not quite as convincing as some of the other reveals, but I think it's okay for what it is as a somewhat spectral design. But with that, let's move on to the main build of the dragon itself. And again, I am taking these photos outside because I currently am on vacation in Morocco, which is why I'm not in my normal review studio. But I actually think it makes a little bit more sense to showcase Ronto outside because that's pretty much where we've seen the character. So taking a look at the build for the dragon, obviously you can see that the wings are mounted on click hinges so you can move them up and down, but there is no other sort of lateral movement. Personally, I would have much preferred if the wings were mounted on ball joints. I think it would have been really nice to be able to fold the wings back, and again, if you look at what Ronto looks like in the show, the wings are not even supposed to be this big. I promise we'll stop comparing it directly to the show because I do want to have the set stand on its own merits, but it is a little bit strange. You can have Ronto stand on 2 legs, which I actually think is really nice for posing. It almost feels like a baby version or a very basic version of the guardian dragon that we got for Ninjago Legends, which kind of has it perched on 2 legs, and then you can move the 2 front arms in different positions. And one thing I do appreciate is how both the back and the front legs are mounted on ball joints. Unlike some of the other more juniorized LEGO Ninjago dragons, which limit the articulation for the back legs, you actually have a full range of posability when it comes to moving Ronto around. And of course, when standing up on those 2 back legs, you actually can have her looking forwards with the neck craned all the way down because everything is mounted on ball joints. This, unfortunately, however, does expose some of the problems with the rest of the simplicity of the build. Most of the build is just pretty much a series of 2 1x16 purple bricks which go through the entirety of the body, and honestly, it just feels very simplistic in its design. I'm not necessarily complaining about a set being simple, but it feels a little bit underdeveloped and under-armored, especially compared to a lot of the other Ninjago dragons we have gotten pretty recently, where they continuously push the boundaries of what it means to make a Ninjago dragon. I think the set does look its best when it is standing up on 2 feet because it is closer to what we can see in the show, but there are still so many weird discrepancies that I do have to wonder exactly where the design went to make it look so different than the animation appearance. Standing up on 2 legs, you can also see exactly how the legs are attached on just standard ball joints. The interesting building technique they used for the front legs is they actually have them mounted a little bit forwards compared to what you would normally see for a dragon build like this. Having those front legs be mounted forward makes them feel a little bit more congruous with the body design, so that's actually something I do like about the set. But now let's jump in and take a look at the articulation of the model. This is actually one of the more highly articulatable dragons they've put out for Ninjago, which is always a good thing. Of course, you can move the jaw up and down, but it is just mounted on a standard bar, so it does sometimes get rotated if you're not careful with it, as you just saw. The head itself is mounted on a mixel joint or mini ball joint, and the neck is mounted on a standard ball joint. You can move the wings up and down, but you can't have them be fully vertically up, or else the stud shooters will get in the way. The legs themselves can move back and forth. There is no articulation for the quote-unquote knees of the legs, but I don't really think it needs any. The only thing is I wish the hole on the core joint element was covered up because it just makes it look a little bit more robotic for that SCCBS limb. The back limbs are alright. They are mounted on ball joints. There is a bit of an awkward exposed axle, but otherwise they are totally okay to move around, and you can swish the back of the tail back and forth on double mixel joints, and then finally the tip of the tail can be moved pretty much any direction you want because that's just mounted on a single joint. Altogether, this is actually pretty posable as a model. It doesn't look like Ronto, but it is a posable dragon by itself, and I do appreciate how expressive you can get it in terms of different poses. The one major complaint though I have about the aesthetics of the model is the lower jaw. I found a lot of people complaining online about it as well, and I have to agree with the complaints. It just doesn't really look quite right to me. First of all, the color scheme being gray and light gray is very strange, especially when you compare it to how it should be looking, but even setting that aside, if you were to just completely separate this from the animated model, it very much looks like a robotic jaw to me. It's very geometric in its design. There are these exposed hollow studs, which also do not help making it look like an actual robotic joint, and altogether, it's just a really strange choice to use. I feel like even if they were to just build the same exact design, but maybe make it purple and somehow cover up the way that the jaw is attached, it would have just looked a little bit better than how it does right now. Thankfully, I've seen a lot of folks online do modifications of this that just make it look way better, and you can probably just use any of those modifications on your own design. The back horns are nice, but they fall off incredibly easily during play, as you just saw, and I definitely feel like they should have been a little bit bigger. And of course, talking about the aesthetic points of the model, it doesn't necessarily help that a lot of these exposed axles and ball joints really just make this look more robotic than it should. Whereas the model in the show is incredibly organic, and obviously this is supposed to be an organic dragon, you can clearly see a lot of different elements here that just feel that they don't really fit with the rest of the design. So altogether, I'm just not really sure why the set was designed designed in this particular way. On the back of the model, there are enough studs to mount 2 different minifigures as well as some weapon storage. Unfortunately, it doesn't hold every weapon included in the set, but it is a nice place to store Wildfire's fire bursts on the side of the model that just tuck away very nicely. It's cool that there is seating for 2 minifigures, although it doesn't really make sense to have any minifigures be seated on top of Ronto anyways, because that's not really how it works in universe, but I do understand whenever making a dragon character, LEGO designers do often want to introduce play patterns to allow kids to just enact their own scenarios, so I do like that there is seating options for not just 1 but 2 minifigures as well. Moving on to the rest of the dragon itself, it is utilizing the large wing element introduced earlier this year, which is now the 3rd color we've gotten it in, which is quite nice. We previously got it in sand blue for Ryu, as well as dark green for the forest dragon, and now we're getting it in this nice bright pink color, which I'm sure is going to be very useful for all sorts of different fantasy-like dragons. Other details I do appreciate are these rings around the legs. That is something that you can clearly see in the animation model, how she is wearing some golden rings on the front legs there, so that's something I do appreciate. And I also like some of the building techniques for the curved elements on the side of the front upper legs, which really showcase the more organic design of the creature. Altogether, I definitely have very mixed feelings on this build. It is fun to swoosh around, it definitely is very playable as a dragon, it just doesn't feel like Ronto. And then of course we have to talk about the price, which I haven't even mentioned in this review yet, but it's definitely something that I feel is kind of ridiculous for a set like this, and certainly is not going to do it any favors. I almost feel a bit bad because I do appreciate how Ninjago is trying something new with the color scheme of this set. It's a much more purple and dark blue and pink color scheme compared to really anything we have gotten out of a Ninjago dragon before, which, as I mentioned, is unique. And I always like it when they branch out from just the main elements of the dragons, which is something they're doing a better job of with Dragons Rising, but it just feels to me that this set is almost set up to fail, because again, it is so expensive for what it is. To remind you, this set costs $50 US, 45 euros, and only comes with 381 pieces. Yes, you can make the excuse that it is using that brand new dragon head mold. It's the 3rd occurrence of that dragon mold that we've seen across the summer wave of sets. It's also utilizing a new and exclusive currently color in transparent pink for the back tail. Those are new smoke sort of trail elements that they're utilizing for this wave of Ninjago. And then finally, of course, you're getting those big wings. But I still don't think that justifies the $50 price tag. I get that it includes 4 minifigures, but I feel like that is fairly standard for a $50 set, and if you do get the much superior transforming jet mech, you're already going to have Lloyd and Sora, and not that many people care about Zark given his appearance in the show, which I understand. The designers had no way of knowing Zark was going to be so lame in the show that people would not care about having to pick him up in the sets, but given that he is one of the most common Forbidden 5 members, appearing in 3 sets so far, it certainly isn't doing anything to help the sellability of this set. Maybe if they included rocks or Kurd, that would have been a little bit better, and also would have helped even up the distribution of the minifigures a bit more, but as it is right now, there's just not a lot going for this set when it comes to the minifig selection. But moving on from value, one thing I do really closely want to compare this against now is the show model. I've alluded to it in the earlier parts of the review, but I really do want to do a direct comparison because this is just so bizarre to me. I do not know why this set was designed the way it was. Let's take a quick look at how Ronto looks like in the show as when we saw her in the early half of the previous season last year, and you can see that some details are the same, but others are just completely missing. There are 2 lanterns on the front of the torso for Ronto, which are just completely not included here. The lanterns on the side of the horns look like they're using the LEGO Friends cupcake piece instead of the LEGO minifigure head, which is so strange. She does have the golden bracelets around the front of the legs, which are accurate to the show, but then the wings are a lot smaller. They almost look like the smaller style of wings that we would get in the LEGO Batman sets and some of the smaller LEGO Elves wings, not the wings being this big. So I have a theory that maybe this set was potentially supposed to be released in a somewhat earlier preliminary form for the early part of last year. If you look at the distribution of sets last year, the January wave was pretty much just all mechs plus Egalt. I think it would have made sense to include Egalt alongside Ronto. Obviously, they didn't have this new wing element yet, so it would have used smaller wings. Maybe they would have had the 2 extra lanterns on the front, and I'm not necessarily saying the set would have been a lot better, but it might have been a bit more accurate to what we've seen seen in the show. For whatever reason, it could have been pushed back, which is why we're getting it now, and they figured why not add in the new large-scale dragon wings because we do now have that new piece. It's just a very strange set in its design that just doesn't really match up the animation model, and I definitely have to ask the LEGO designers when I do see them later this year how exactly this set came to be. Altogether, I think I'm about wrapping up my thoughts here on the Ronto set. It certainly is not one of my favorite sets this year. I definitely feel like it's one of the weaker Ninjago dragons we've gotten in a while, and it could have just used a few more iterations. Not even to make it closer to what it looks like in the show, because often show models are based off of preliminary set models, but just to make it a better toy and a more interesting build overall. The horns falling off very easily is not super fun, and honestly, it would have been so much more stable to not have them be mounted on the studs and instead just use these tentacle elements and slotted them directly into these side elements that they're mounted on. I don't know why they didn't do that. You've also got, of course, the very robotic-looking elements of the detail with the lower jaw, as well as the SCCBS limb on the curved front parts, and altogether, I just feel like this could have been a lot better for what it is. When I first saw Ronto and heard we were getting a set, I was really excited to see what the set was going to look like because it is so different compared to any other Ninjago dragon, but this set just isn't really doing it for me. But now let's take a quick look at the minifigure selection of this set. Much like the transforming jet mech, the much superior set, this set includes both Lloyd and Sora. Lloyd is in his spectral or ghost hunter suit, and I really do love the armor pieces on these outfits. The dual molding with the dragon head and the bamboo armor just looks so cool, and I think Lloyd actually has one of the best outfits out of all of them. The introduction of dark tan and dark red into the design of all of the ninja, or at least the main core ninja this wave, is a really nice touch, and it's definitely something I really appreciate. However, my complaints, as always with these suits, are going to be the same. There is no way to pose up your minifigures, you can't turn their heads, the mask is molded into the armor, and I understand they're trying to build off of a system for Dragons Rising, but I for one cannot wait for us to enter a new era of Ninjago and do away with the masks being molded into the armor. I feel like it's just so hard to take photos of your minifigures when the masks are literally molded into the armor themselves, and I've actually resorted to cutting up some of the pieces so I can take better and more expressive poses of my minifigures and photos of them, which I never do unless I absolutely have to. So for Duckbricks to have to cut a Lego piece to take a better photo of it, I definitely feel like they should have just come up with some way to have the armor as its own piece, and then just also have the mask piece as its own element as well. They've done it before, and I don't really know why they couldn't do it again. I guess with Lloyd you could kinda turn the head that way, but honestly it just doesn't really feel right to have the mask piece just clearly in front there. The one thing that I do actually appreciate about the set is that they actually included Lloyd's standard sword accessory. We haven't really seen the ninja's signature weapons appear in sets recently, which is something I really miss, and I'm really glad they did manage to include the sword in this set at least, because it is something that he uses pretty much every single episode, but we never really see it in sets anymore. Moving on to Sora. Again, she has the same pros and cons of Lloyd. I love the armor piece having the bamboo and the dragon head, but you just can't really turn the head. The hairpiece being dual molded is very nice. It is just your standard Sora hairpiece, and I do like the design of the printing for the torso itself. It is a really nice new suit for Sora, and given that we're really only getting a new suit maybe once a year at tops for these ninja, it is nice to actually have Sora in a brand new outfit for the summer wave. For whatever reason, the lantern accessory she has in this set is different than all of the other lanterns the ninja use across the entire rest of the summer wave. It has a black stud at the end, and it is just plain transparent blue instead of the opalescent blue that we've been getting for the other lanterns, which again lends to the very strange development cycle of the set, feeling like it doesn't quite belong in this series. Moving onwards, we have Wildfire, who unfortunately doesn't have her armor piece. Don't really know why they didn't include the armor piece. It clearly is still in production because Kerr uses the exact same armor piece in a different color, but otherwise I think it is nice that we did get a new hair piece for Wildfire. Just would have been nice to get either the armor piece or a new suit for the character. Zarked, on the other hand, is genuinely a really cool design. I actually like the design of Zarked. I like the headpiece they're using for the brand new style of helmet, as well as the design of the Forbidden 5 details on the torso. It's just a shame that Zarked is so lame on the show. The Forbidden Fraud for real. Moving onwards, let's just wrap up my thoughts on this set. It definitely is one of the more divisive Ninjago sets in recent history, and I know a lot of folks are really disappointed with how this looks compared to its appearance in the show, but also just as a set on its own. I definitely am very excited to see people take this set and try to modify it to make it look better, to maybe bring it a little bit closer to how it should look in the show, because it's definitely something that has potential. It's a cool color scheme, and I really am excited to see what people make of this set when they make their own mocks and modifications of it. I think there's potential here, but for $50 it is ridiculously overpriced. Maybe if it was $30, I could maybe say, okay, well at least you're getting at least a pretty good deal, but $50 is kind of crazy for a set like this. I cannot imagine it selling very well, and I really just hope this doesn't discourage LEGO from trying to give us more unique color schemes of dragons like this in the future, because I feel like it has more to do with this set and how it doesn't really look the way it should look in the show, or just look in terms of a set in general, as opposed to the color scheme. If they were to give us another purple and dark blue dragon, but with a much more unique build, maybe do a bigger version of Xanth, now that, spoiler alert, we might be seeing a new form of Xanth in the future, that could be super cool, and I would love seeing them try to tackle this concept again as a larger scale set. This one just isn't doing it for me. That's all for this review, so now let's move on to the next set. Okay, so this is set number 71845, Lloyd's Jet Mech. It comes with 1,112 pieces and retails for $110 or 100 euros. It also comes with a few exclusive minifigures, specifically Kerr, the elemental master of Decay and member of the Forbidden Five, and a spectral version of Tyr, the Dragonian general from the first wave. This review is going to be a little bit different than my normal reviews because I'm actually currently on vacation in North Africa, which is why I decided to take this set out into the wild and photograph it outdoors, just giving us a bit of a different flavor for this review and the Ronto review coming soon as well. So taking a look at the composition of the set, the main build is obviously the transforming jet mech, and this is a really cool transformation. The set was designed by legendary LEGO designer Lee Chi-wing, who designed really fantastic sets like the Climber mech as well as the Dragonstone Shrine, and this is his latest creation. It's a really interesting feature to have a mech transform into a jet and vice versa, and I'm honestly surprised it has been pulled off as seamlessly as it has. But of course, the jet is only one part of the set. It also includes our largest villain build for the entire summer wave, which is a little unfortunate that this is the largest we're getting, but it is actually quite nice in the form of a spectral dragon for Kerr to ride upon, which is why many folks have been taking to calling it the Decay Dragon. Although it doesn't seem to be canon in the show so far, it is still nice that the villains are getting some sort of a build representation, especially because we don't really get that many villain sets nowadays. We also get a small little side build for Sora, specifically because the design director for Ninjago wanted all of the characters to be flying on the box art, so Sora gets a little bit of a jet that kind of feels like it's been inspired by stuff like Space Police 3. But let's take a look at the transformation of the set, and I'll be doing this transformation a ton of times throughout this review because, one, it's also really quick to transform and just very cool and satisfying to see the entire thing transform, but the way it works is you basically just split out the legs and arms of the jet and it transforms into a mech. It's a surprisingly simple transformation, requiring not that many different points of articulation to move around, but it's a very convincing one. In mech form, it very clearly is supposed to be a mech, and in jet form, it is a very convincing jet. This is unlike any other transformation feature we've really ever seen from any LEGO set that I personally can think of. Sure, we have gotten LEGO Icons Transformers sets in the past, literally for the Transformers brand, like Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, and the upcoming Soundwave, but we haven't really gotten a play-scale set that transforms to this degree of playability on both sides. In fact, the last time I can think of us getting something like this was with LEGO Alpha Team, where we did have a transforming jet, but the transformation feature of that was basically just to bend the wings down and turn it into some sort of a sled. This is much more ambitious. LEGO designer Lee writes on Instagram about how he developed this set that it was a concept they were trying to make for a while. It actually was supposed to come out last year as a Zane jet, but unfortunately they just weren't able to crack the design until now. It was pushed off to the summer 2025 wave, and they finally got it to work, transforming very quickly and easily with just a few simple steps. Altogether, in terms of value, which we'll be getting back to in a little bit, $110 or 100 euros does feel very fair for this, if anything for the amount of development work that went into making this actually function. I am genuinely blown away by just how easy it is to transform this from one mode to the next. It is so satisfying to bring the wings up and down, to raise the cockpit into the jet position. It is really remarkable in the way it's built, and I cannot wait to dive more into the details and share a little bit more about my thoughts personally on the value. But for now, let's see that transformation into a jet one more time and then move on to these side builds. We'll go from smallest to largest in the way that you actually build them when you're putting together the set. This is a little side build for Sora to pilot a jet into battle. Honestly, I actually really like it for what it is. It reminds me of a lot of these smaller LEGO space bikes we've gotten, as I mentioned, kind of harkening back to Space Police 3, but with a modern twist. I like how it has that color scheme of dark blue and white. The transparent pink highlights are really good as well, showcasing the element of technology, and I also like how it has that Ninjago flare utilizing one of the core mech armor pieces as the front intake engine of the jet, but of course still retaining that sort of spacey feel. I don't expect this to appear in the show, but it is a nice little side build to have been added onto the set. I like how it even has a little back element to have that glowing bit of technology or exhaust on the back, and it scales really nicely next to the minifigure as well. And of course, we will be taking a closer look at all of the minifigures at the end of the review. Altogether, it's a really small item, it's very swooshable, but I do really enjoy it for what it is. You can even angle the jet exhaust on the back if you want to get it into a slightly different position. Maybe when taking off, the jet is facing the ground, and then you can tilt it upwards when it's in flight, so there's a lot of things you can do with it. Far more impressive as a side build though, and almost kind of a main competing build to the actual thing, is this bone dragon here, ridden by Kerr. The Bone Dragon is utilizing the LEGO Ninjago Rising Dragon Strike gimmick headpiece for the skull of the dragon, which I actually think works really well for this build. It is suitably skeletal in its build, and I actually do like how a lot of the details make it look like the skull of a dragon. The mouth, when closed, has a little transparent blue piece in it, which you can kind of see as the dragon's eyes, but then when you open up the mouth, it actually looks like it's breathing some sort of a blue fire, and I'm a little bit mixed on that. I don't really know how else they would have been able to give the dragon eyes, but it definitely does feel a bit awkward when the mouth is open and there clearly are no pupils inside the eyes itself, but I would say that's more of a fault of the way that the actual piece was designed for the dragon strike element and not really for its usage in this build, because I certainly cannot think of another way to get pupils in there, and I like how the little breath at least adds a bit of color behind the eyes. One cool thing about the dragon is that it actually stands up on two legs, so you can actually have it be a formidable foe kind of perched up, ready to attack the jet, and when it's standing on its two legs here, you can see a little bit more extra detail like the bone rib cage. There are some stickers on the sides of the neck to showcase the Dragonian details, and then of course you have a really great color scheme of dark blue, the red, as well as the light blue color kind of bringing in that ghostly appearance, with of course all of the white lending its appearance to a very skeletal creature. It's actually the second time we have gotten a skeletal Ninjago dragon, the first of which being the massive Griefbringer, and this is a really cool one to get. I really appreciate that despite it being a side build, you have a lot of different things you can do with it. The neck moves up and down, you can even position the head up and down ever so slightly thanks to the clips, and of course, you do have the banners on the back as well. Plus, the wings on the side are obviously very skeletal in the way they're built, but for once, it actually makes a lot of sense for them to be built this way. It is a skeleton dragon after all, and I do like how they brought in some of the detailing from the Dragonian warriors into the blades of the dragon wings. The only thing I will say is that, like a lot of these smaller LEGO Ninjago dragons, the back legs are just mounted on click joints, which do limit the posability somewhat. It would have been really nice to be able to move the legs back and forth. I do understand why they do it. It's purely for stability, especially if younger kids are supposed to be playing with this. They are designed to just be plopped down and easy to stand up, but for me as a builder, I always do prefer to swap out those joints to use mixel joints, but thankfully it's super easy to do that. You literally can just swap the joints out, so it's not that big of a deal if you want to customize it yourself. With the minifig removed, you can see what the dragon looks like with no minifigure. It has kind of an empty saddle-like appearance, and of course you do have the ability to position the feet on the mixel joints, so that is at least nice that you get that level of articulation there. And altogether, I'm just really impressed by how substantial this is of a build compared to a lot of the other side builds we've gotten in the past. It's using relatively few pieces. Obviously the wings are just using a little bit of technique here and there, but to great effect. It is really maximizing the usage out of the parts that go into it. So for a side build, I really can't complain. The flags on the back are meant to interact with the reveal blade gimmick, which is prevalent throughout pretty much every single Ninjago Dragons Rising Season 3 Part 2 set. Moving the blade over the flag will reveal the Forbidden 5 emblem, or the evil spectral dragonian emblem, on the stickered flag there, and I like how it actually is very clearly supposed to be the logo that you can see on the characters, especially when you fully cover your camera or your eyes with the blade. It also doubles as a really nice dragon-like design. You can see the jaws and the fangs of the dragon underneath, and that makes this one of my personal favorite emblem sort of reveals that we've gotten this entire wave, because it doubles as not just the logo, but also as a really cool dragon face. Altogether, this is a very solid side build for a villain build of the set. I love the color scheme. I feel like it is balanced very, very nicely for what it is. You've got just the right mix of that kind of lighter aqua blue color alongside the dark blue, the bright red being brought in on just very small and sparing amounts, just like in the actual Spectral Dragonian minifigures themselves. But I think that's enough talking about the side build, and it's time we get in to the main build of the set, which is, of course, Lloyd's transforming jet mech. I think it makes the most sense to start with the jet form of the mech and then focus in on the mech form, but to do that, let's showcase the transformation in detail from mech to jet. So first, you rotate the head backwards and the head actually becomes a gun turret, which, may I add, is a very, very cool touch. The blades on these swords actually turn into tips of the wings, which makes sense. They're utilizing recolors of the Prime Empire blades in the cool yellow color, which actually works really well. I'm very happy with the way that they were able to add that splash of color into the design. Then you bring the two legs back, join them up with a Technic pin, move the feet backwards, which become your engines. There are two little exhaust engines on the sides of the feet, which rotate in to kind of point backwards, and then finally you fold the arms back. The lower arms literally just tuck in, and they really don't cause that many problems as you would expect. They're just very tucked away underneath the wings, as you can see right here. And then the transformation is complete. It is very, very simple and yet very compact. One thing that the promotional material and the box art does not really showcase with this jet that I really wanted to showcase in the review is what it looks like when the wings are folded back. And honestly, I greatly prefer that compared to the actual quote-unquote official method of displaying the jet, which is with the wings pointed out flat. I feel like this just looks more like a traditional fighter jet. It is really, really cool to have those wings angled back, and obviously they are on ball joints for a reason. The entire point of them being on ball joints is so you can do stuff like that. It's just a bit unfortunate that the promotional materials don't really showcase the jet like that, because I think it actually makes it look even better. Now, the other really cool thing that you don't really see in the promotional images is that you can kind of have a downward cant to the cockpit there. So much like the Osprey or even something like Kai's jet from Rebooted, you can have the cockpit tilt downwards ever so slightly if you just want to have it have a little bit of a different look, like maybe it's swooping or diving downwards, which is again something that I do appreciate about the playability of the set. The joints somehow work very well as engine intakes. They feel very mechanical. There's enough layers to the way the joints are set up where it feels like those are actual engine intake elements, which is obviously not what the pieces are supposed to be, but it actually works really well in that sense. And altogether, the color scheme and all the shaping of the jet just works so well. If you do want to see what it looks like in flight with the actual wings deployed, here is a quick look at the wings just fully spread out, and yeah, I think that is a nice look, and it definitely feels a bit different. It feels bulkier, maybe almost like a troop transport or some sort of a large jet, whereas when the wings are pushed backwards, it feels more sleek like a fighter jet. So it really depends on what you want to do with it, but honestly, I definitely prefer it in its fighter jet form. One thing I do want to call out is just the color scheme and the color blocking. For a transforming set, this has remarkably good color blocking, where you can see the cool yellow around the engine intakes continues on a sticker on the Technic panel, and that's one of the times where I do feel like those Technic panel stickers are necessary for the aesthetics, because you have that stripe of cool yellow going from the top of the jet all the way around the engine, and then of course you just have a little bit of a hint of that yellow scattered throughout the model as just engine highlights, and only in stripe form. Everything else is either green in the spring green form or dark green, which also works really well as layering for the model. The way the colors are layered is really, really cool, and I like how it uses gold very sparingly, so you're not really overwhelmed with gold like sometimes you might be on some other LEGO Ninjago sets. It just feels like the right amount of gold to add in just a little bit of a splash of color here and there. Another cool thing I want to point out is how they're able to use the regular LEGO green color, so the standard green, just on the top of the wings. So it feels like that is a slightly more armored up portion of the wings themselves, and then it transitions to dark green, and then the brighter green color, which I do find really interesting how they have that kind of separation in colors there, and it just makes it feel a lot more detailed, like there's different layers almost of metal going into the set. The usage of the Technic panels as the wings there also works really well because they basically have built-in engine intakes, which is really cool to see, and altogether, this is just a remarkably swooshable vehicle. One thing I do want to point out is that a lot of folks online have criticized the placement of the back feet engines, how it really just detracts from the sleekness of the jet and makes it feel like it isn't really just a smoother flat jet. And I do understand that from the side profile, it does feel like they are raised up very high, but honestly, when playing with it, I don't even really notice it. And I think it was the best that could have been done, especially because there was no way to actually add knees to this set. I think that adding knees would have just made it so much more complicated. It would have driven the price up, and I don't even know if it would have been possible to make it as sturdy and stable as it is right now as a jet with knees. So to have just a very slight bend to the legs be built in, and then have the feet act as the jet engines makes the most sense to me. Although I will say that honestly, I don't really agree with a lot of the criticisms in terms of that part. I feel like it is just as fine to be swooshed around with those big engines on the back. It kind of makes it feel powerful, it makes it feel more unique as a jet. And honestly, I feel like it kind of adds to the appearance of the jet as opposed to takes away from it, because it makes it feel a little bit more unique, and also makes it clearly supposed to be a mech versus just a regular jet. The development of this set was pretty crazy, how they initially wanted to do a transforming jet, wasn't sure if it was possible, they made a sketch model that was purely just a jet that was last minute turned into the Aaron and Roz jet because that made sense for the story, but also because they already just had a perfectly good jet on its own ready to go. Then it was supposed to be a Zane jet, but they wanted to integrate Lloyd into Zane's combo mech from earlier this year. It didn't make sense to put green into the color scheme of that mech, so they then decided to just have the Lloyd vehicle be this jet instead of Zane's. So this went through a lot of iterations, and honestly, I would love to see somebody online color swap this into a Zane jet. I think that would be really cool to just see this exact build done, but in Zane colors, you know, just swap out the cool yellow for bright blue and maybe swap out some of the other pieces in the dark green color to white. I'm sure that there's a way that it could have been done, and I actually would have loved to see something like that. So maybe some folks online could try their hand at putting that together, because I feel like that would be really cool. But I am really happy with this as a Lloyd jet right now, because Lloyd doesn't actually get that many jets or vehicles like this in the series. More often than not, he actually has dragons, so it is really cool to just get a main vehicle focus set for Lloyd for once, because we don't actually get that many of those. Now, of course, in its jet form, it is remarkably swooshable, which you can see I was having a ton of fun swooshing it around the Marrakesh markets right here, because it's just genuinely very fun to bring around. Now, the cool thing about it is, again, with those movable wings, you actually have the option to really showcase the engines on the back of the model as having fuel coming out of the engines themselves. I like the usage of transparent blue as the jet engine, so you have two on the sides of the feet. There are little bits of transparent blue jet elements on the sides of the legs themselves, also shrouded in light gray, which showcases some of the more robotic aspects of it, and you could even argue the blue Technic pins on the back side of the hands could even act as some jet exhaust elements if you want to be really creative with it. So altogether, it is genuinely really nicely done. And of course, we're about to move on to the mech form because I have so much more to say about this in mech form as well, but just to sum up my thoughts on the jet form of this build. This blew me away when I saw it last year at Fan Media Days, because when it was first shown to me, I didn't even realize it was a mech. I thought this was just a really cool and slick looking jet, and then I realized that no, this has a transformation feature. This actually is a 2-in-1 model, without any rebuilding other than repositioning the blades on the end of the wings as the swords. It is just remarkably done how they were able to pull off such a clean transformation feature with a set like this, and gives me a lot of hope for future LEGO transforming sets, because I feel like this basically set the mold for how you want to do a transforming jet into a mech. If they want to make Starscream from Transformers, Well, they have it right here. They basically can use this exact template and modify it just a little bit for an icon set and turn it into a Transformers model. That's how good this set is, where it really just feels like a set of its own. I love how all of the little details add in, like how the head turns into a turret on the top. You can literally see the way the head has been built is specifically to make it feel like a gun turret on the top of the model, so nothing feels as it should be out of place. The only thing that I will say is a little bit out of place in the jet form are the hands. Yes, they are tucked away for most of the appearance of it in jet form, and this is really nitpicking here, but from certain angles, it is very obvious that the hands are just kind of resting underneath there, so that is just a very minor con in my opinion. But now, let's take a look at this in mech form. So let's hit that transformation one more time and take a look at just how easy it is to transform this from jet to mech. What you do is basically you split up the legs, splay them outwards, you basically just plop it downwards and apply enough force and the feet will automatically adjust for themselves. Then you move the hands out, move the wings upwards or downwards. There's actually two different ways you can choose to display it. One with the wings pointing up, kind of acting as detail elements or maybe even like a jetpack for the mech, and then one with the wings pointing down, which almost makes it look like it is fully armored up in its back or maybe has some sort of a cape. Then you just take the blades on the ends of the wings, turn them into the swords of the mech, and voila, it is good to go. Fully transformed, and those are the two different ways you can display it. This is so cool. Let's take a closer look at the set in mech form right now.
Aesthetically speaking, I think I definitely prefer the set in jet form as opposed to mech form, which is a little bit interesting, especially because the box art obviously highlights it in mech form, and pretty much all the promotional materials showcase this in the mech form, right down to its appearance in the show. But I will say that it does not look bad. I just definitely prefer the jet because it feels a lot more sleek. It is somewhat swooshable in mech form, but it definitely is obviously a lot more swooshable in jet form, but I actually really like how cohesive it is in mech form by itself. You have, of course, the blades used as these swords, which used to be on the ends of the wings, and I just feel like those work really well. The cool yellow for the blades really set it apart from some of the other detail aspects of the set, whereas mostly, again, in jet form, the cool yellow was pretty much restricted to just kind of flying stripes or like racing stripes. Here, they feel like glowing swords, and they actually feel like they're made out of energy or something like that, which actually works really well for the design of the build.
I also really like the way the cockpit sits in the chest. It really prominently highlights the minifigure, which I think is very solid, but it also feels very unique compared to a lot of other Ninjago mechs, which makes sense because it is supposed to be the front cockpit of a jet, but it also just feels like it has its own unique visual identity. It reminds me a lot of LEGO Exoforce, which had very similar looking windscreens highlighting the minifigure in the center chest of the mech. Of course, it does have its own head, and I definitely do think that adds a lot to the design of the set. You really can have it make it look like it's having different expressions or have it be looking in different directions based on how you position the head, which is very nice. And articulation wise, it actually is pretty solid. Moving into the articulation of the set, let's take a look at how all of the joints move, starting with the legs. So tilting the wings upwards, let's give us some room to move the legs around. You can rotate the legs back and forth and splay them outwards thanks to the ratchet joints. Sometimes, if you're not careful, these pieces can be knocked off if you actually have them conflict with the way they're bending backwards, but it's actually quite rare for that to happen. You have to really be rough with it for it to do that. My favorite part about the articulation of the set, though, is the ankle technique. I hope that every future LEGO mech uses ankles like these. It's a technique that they actually used in the LEGO Hero Factory Witch Doctor set back in the day, as well as some Bionicle sets as well, which basically allows you to rotate the feet on multiple different points. You can move them back and forth on one set of ball joints and then side to side on another set of ball joints. And that is a really cool technique to have this be as posable as you can make it in ankles without having to utilize the extra piston elements, which are very clunky and definitely would have gotten in the way. It is really satisfying to basically bend the legs in any direction you would need and then just have it be able to stand up in that direction thanks to the feet, and it essentially gets rid of a need for knees because of that. This is one of the mech sets that is one of the rare sets, I will say, absolutely didn't need knees, because you can get it in all sorts of different poses, like this very radical one right here, just thanks to the strength of the ankles. We have not seen a system-based LEGO mech utilize ankle joints like this literally ever before. I would know, because I own every single mech LEGO has ever made. This is the first time they have used that technique in a system set, and now I feel like there is no excuse to use that technique for pretty much every future LEGO mech. It's compact. If you don't want to have to use the pistons to have too much mechanical detail in the back or to have a little bit too much bulk in the back, this is the perfect alternative to allowing you to really pose up a mech without having to fully restrict the ankles like we have seen on so many LEGO mechs nowadays. The ankles barely can move, and even when a set has knees, if it doesn't have ankles, the knees are kind of useless, because if you can't have it stand on its own feet like this, then there is no point in bending knees. I would actually say ankles are more important than knees, and this set really proves it. You don't need knees to make a mech fully posable as long as it has as posable as possible ankles. So that is a major pro in my opinion, and I am very happy with how that's done. Moving on from that though to the arms, they do have the unenviable task of having to support pretty much all of the armoring on the top of the jet and the wings, but somehow it really is able to pull it off totally fine. You have a ball joint which allows you to angle the wings back and forth, and I think that helps a ton in terms of the posability of the set, because you have it in sort of this attack or flight mode, and then you have it in a more relaxed or maybe a more defensive mode with the wings down. And from the back, the model looks phenomenal. Obviously, that's because the set is designed to be viewed from the top, so this is maybe the best looking back of a mech we're ever going to get from a LEGO set, because it is literally meant to be viewed from that angle. But that's the thing, because this is a transforming build, it looks good from every single angle, and that just adds so much to the aesthetics of the build. Part budget had to be spent on making it look good at every angle, because it was meant to be seen from every angle, and because of that, you can get it into all sorts of different poses and be able to appreciate it in all sorts of different ways. One thing I will say is that it is slightly hampered in articulation thanks to the massive Technic panels on the back of the model, especially those big dark green ones which make up most of the bodywork of the jet, and honestly, that's a necessary sacrifice when it comes to making a transforming set like this. I just really am impressed by how posable it is and also how stable. I have it literally standing on a tree right now, and it was fully able to just stand with literally no effort on my end. I basically just took it, moved the legs apart, placed it down on the tree, and the feet did all the work for me, thanks to those incredibly powerful ankles. 4 different ball joints going into those ankles, which are really nice. I also like that detail-wise, a lot of the elements that made up the jet exhausts now actually make it look like they're thrusters for the mech. You have thrusters on the upper legs there in the transparent blue. You have actual positionable thrusters on the boots there, which kind of make them look like rocket boots. And then, of course, you even have the fully posable head, and the wings themselves also look really good. Despite it being a transforming build, a lot of the exposed Technic pins are kept to a minimum. I barely even noticed the light tan Technic pins on the sides of the wings, and yes, it is slightly asymmetrical with one Technic pin sticking out of one side of the wings, and then another Technic pin sticking out on one side of the legs, but they are so unobtrusive that honestly you don't even notice that it's asymmetrical in its design. It is remarkably fun to pose and just to get into all sorts of different positions and scenarios. And so, altogether, I am very pleased with this set. I definitely do feel like this is one of the most innovative LEGO sets we've gotten in a long time, and I love how the Ninjago theme has continuously given us new innovations in classic LEGO play patterns. We have been seeing transforming LEGO sets ever since the early days of even classic space. One could even argue we were getting transforming LEGO sets as part of the original basis of how LEGO works as a theme. But as the years have gone on, clearly LEGO has been able to continually iterate on its designs, and this is the culmination of a full-on transforming LEGO set. I am very happy with this model, how it looks on both forms, and will absolutely recommend this. It skyrocketed to becoming one of my favorite LEGO Summer Wave sets just the entire year, not just for Ninjago, and honestly, I didn't even feel that until I had it in hand. When the wave of sets was first announced, I was much more excited for stuff like the Guardian Dragon or the Fire Knight Knight mech or the Temple Bounty, but this might actually be my favorite set of the wave, and that is saying a lot, especially in a wave full of heavy hitters, just because of how good it is as a toy, how good it is as a functional product, and how it really breaks the rules and reshapes what it means to be a transforming LEGO toy. I really cannot wait to see more transforming designs come from both designer Lee Chi-wing and also from LEGO in general, because this has just set a new high. It's a new precedent for what I want to see out of a transforming LEGO build. And unfortunately, I will be comparing all future transforming LEGO sets to this from now on. And with that, we can sum up this review by taking a look at the price. $110 for 1,112 pieces is actually pretty good, both on paper and in terms of what you get. For the development process to make a set like this alone, I would say that is worth it. Sure, it does hurt a little bit knowing that the price of this was probably supposed to be $100 and then was later increased because it is 100 euros, and usually they do keep those at parity, but I will say $110 is very fair for this. I honestly, and I never say this in reviews, this is maybe the one time I will actually ever say it, they might have been able to charge $120 and gotten away with it, and I would have still said, this is so good, it probably would have been worth even more money than it actually costs right now. And cherish this moment, because that is the exact opposite of what I have said on my last, 50 LEGO reviews, where I usually end the review by saying, this set is good, or it's bad, whatever it is, it should cost around $10 or $20 less. For me to say that they probably could have charged $10 more, that is saying a lot. So I love this set. I absolutely recommend it. It is the #1 set I recommend from the entire Ninjago wave. If you had to pick one set, pick this one, because building it is going to blow you away with the way that it's done. But with that, I think it's now time to dive a little bit deeper into the minifigures. And of course, this set does include Lloyd, Sora, Tyr, a Dragonian warrior, as well as Kerr, the elemental master of decay, who is exclusive to this set and probably will remain exclusive to this set forever. So let's take a look at those right now. Let's start off with the minifig I think most people are really excited for to get out of the set, and that is Kerr, the final member of the Forbidden Five and the Elemental Master of Decay. Kerr wields a scythe-like weapon, which is in line with all of the Forbidden Five almost being like evil versions of the ninja, at least in terms of their weapons, and Kerr also has a printed arm, which is really special and cool for the design. I love the way that you can really see that the tattered cloth feeds into the design aesthetic of the character. There are bits and layers of ripped, tattered cloth pieces all around the figure itself, and it really lends the fact that obviously the elemental power here is decay. It's also really cool how obviously you can see the entirety of the figure is covered in these little Thoraxian symbols, and they kind of have this evil looking language emblazoned in metallic gold across all of the wraps, really adding on to the more mystical appearance of the character itself. And of course you have that mottled green skin underneath. Olive green was the perfect color to use for the skin of this character, and the only complaint I do have is that this is technically supposed to be an animal character, and I'm really not sure how that happened, where the development came in where obviously these are supposed to be animal creatures from the realm of the wildness, because I am not seeing an animal at all. A lot of people have speculated that this could be maybe like a raven or something like that, but when we asked Doc Wyatt, he said that's probably for the designers to reveal, and asking the designers, they said they don't really know or remember, and he would know, so I don't really know if anybody knows what animal this is actually supposed to be, but that's really my only complaint with an otherwise stellar villain figure. Moving on to the spectral suit for Lloyd here, this minifigure is exclusive to both this set and the Ronto set, and I actually really like the design. All of the ninja suits have dark tan and dark red integrated into the design of the figures, and I actually think that works out really well for a ninja outfit. I almost feel like these should be base ninja suits where they kind of should wear stuff like this before going off on missions, because of course for Dragon's Rising, you have this really nice dual molded dragon and bamboo style of armor, and my only major complaint about this is one I've said on every single video featuring minifigures like this, and that is that you cannot turn or pose the heads with the armor on. One thing they have done for the Dragon's Rising minifigure development system is that they have molded the mask into the armor, which looks cool from an aesthetics perspective, but unfortunately means that if you want to pose your minifigures showcasing their heads turning or looking back and forth, you literally just cannot do that. There is no articulation you can get. Once the mask is on, you cannot rotate it, and that is very disappointing in my opinion. I really wish there was some sort of a way they could have done it where that the armor piece was its own element, and then you could just have a different type of wrap on the front for the mask that you could either remove or rotate with the armor. As it is right now, I mean, I guess you can kind of rotate the head outside of that mask, but it just doesn't look that good, and I've resorted to even cutting my armor pieces to allow myself to take better photos of my minifigures with the heads actually turned. Moving on to Sora's minifigure here, this one is another really nice one. I actually think this is one of my favorite suits from the entire lineup. Sora has, again, that really nice dual molded dragon head and bamboo armor element. The dark blue is a great color scheme to use for this, and the underside of the ninja outfit also is really nicely done in terms of integrating in that coral color. This is the only suit that does not factor in the dark red or dark tan as opposed to all of the other main ninja characters, but I guess it kind of makes sense. Sora is kind of off doing her own thing with Aaron and Roz this season anyways, so it makes sense that there isn't that much visual consistency when it comes to these suits, but because of that, they've been able to give her a completely unique design. The only thing that is kind of missing about this minifigure is this is the first version of Sora that we've gotten without her golden arm, and I feel like that was such a strong part of the character. It was a really clear aesthetic point, and obviously you could say she's wearing a sleeve over it, or if it is armor, she's just not wearing the armor, but I feel like that's the only thing missing from that figure. Finally, the only other exclusive minifigure for the set is Tyr. Tyr is the leader and general of the Dragonians who has been forcibly converted into an evil form. I don't really know if the spectral form is canon because I don't really even know what the spectral Dragonians lore is supposed to be. Are they ghosts of dead Dragonians? Are they the current Dragonians we saw but turned into ghosts? I don't really know, and I don't really know if that's ever going to be explained, but as it is right now, they did bother to give us a different variation of the figure, and he actually has some more unique elements for him as opposed to the January Wave version of the same character. And that's because they have recolored the skull of the Dragonians in white to use for this minifigure, as opposed to all the other characters which use it in the gunmetal gray color. The designer actually stated that they were only able to add in that special recolor for Tyr because they used that piece in one of the other sets as part of a small flyer. So it's really cool that that's kind of how the budget worked out there. Since they included it in two sets, it made sense to use for this figure. As opposed to the other Dragonians, he does have gunmetal gray armor as opposed to the dark blue, which all the other ones have, which just helps them apart from the other Dragonian warriors coming this wave, and I do appreciate the effort in doing that. And moving on, finally, there is one last spectral Dragonian here, and this one is unfortunately without wings. That is one of the complaints I have about all of these spectral Dragonians in this wave. A lot of them just don't have the wings, whereas they were really good in giving us the wings in the first half of the year. That being said, it is still a really cool minifigure design. I love the transparent blue arms. This one does have a ghost trail, so it's a nice new color of the light aqua and transparent blue, and then of course you have that recolored dark blue armor and gunmetal gray helmet with the red horns. I know a lot of folks online have been talking about how maybe these would have looked even better without the red, and I can kind of see it. I think the red does add a really nice highlight, but I also can see it looking cool without. But for me personally, I'm totally fine with the design here. They're not as gaudy or garish as the last recolor of the villain factions that we got last year in the form of the Purple Wolf Warriors, and I think that this is a really nice evolution, bringing us into a more ghostly appearance for this particular wave. And with that, we have summed up my thoughts on Lloyd's Jet Mech. Easily one of the standout sets of the entire year for Ninjago, for me in particular, and I definitely would recommend this. It is definitely one of the coolest transformation features we've seen out of a LEGO set ever. That's all for this review, so now let's move on to the next set. Here is set number 71844 Ninja Combat Vehicle. It is the latest in a series of combo vehicles that LEGO has been putting out for Ninjago, and after last year's rather disappointing entry, there were a lot of eyes and stakes pointed towards this brand new set, and I'm happy to say it at least looks a lot better than last year's. It retails for $100 and 90 euros, but only comes with 561 pieces, and that price is pretty crazy. We will get back to that near the end of the review, because I could not believe my eyes when I saw the price, and unfortunately not in a good way. That being said, There are a lot of things to love about the set. It is our introduction to Frack, finally in physical minifigure form. It comes with two villains in the form of a spectral Dragonian warrior and Noct, the elemental master of brute force and a member of the Forbidden Five, Cole, Kai, and Wildfire, and altogether is a very interesting vehicle, certainly aesthetically pleasing compared to the previous combo vehicle. I think the thing that I really like about this set is that it tries something that feels new for Ninjago. The idea of a jet that attaches onto two bikes isn't necessarily fully fresh, but the way they've pulled it off does feel like it is its own unique vehicle. I love the gigantic tires that definitely did add to the size of the vehicle and certainly added to the price as well, and I just feel like aesthetically it is very interesting and unique compared to what we've seen before. I do want to start off though by taking a look at the villain side vehicle here. This is not really anything canon, it's just supposed to be some sort of Dragonian flyer, but I do appreciate how they were able to use the skull piece recolored in white for the front part of this glider. LEGO designer Lee Chi-Wing actually stated that in order to get that piece recolored for Tyr, he was able to convince the designer of this set to use it for this vehicle. Basically, it only was worth including in a new color if they were able to use it outside of just one set. So I actually really like how they were able to factor that into the vehicle here. The back of the vehicle has a flag that can be shown with the reveal blade here, which basically is a red filter that goes over your lens, which just makes all of the blue parts of that color blend into the background and allows you to more clearly see the white and red, which is what it's supposed to be hiding. It's not really hiding a face that convincingly because it very clearly is supposed to be a face anyways, but I think it works well and does the job okay. It certainly isn't as in-depth as some of the reveals that we've gotten for Explorians or Alpha Team back in the early days of LEGO, but I think it does the job fine. The glider itself actually reminds me a lot of a Possession side build. We used to get those very basic dragons, and I think it kind of makes sense because this wave is very spooky themed. That being said, I do want to move on to the main vehicle though, because I feel like this is where the meat and potatoes are. The main build consists of two practically identical bikes. There are only a couple of colors swapped out from one bike to the other, one representing the blue tinge of Wildfire's fire, and the other representing the standard Kai orange fire. The rest of the vehicle is Frack's jet, and it's actually really cool to get a serpentine themed vehicle as a main ninja hero themed car. I will say the serpentine aspects of this vehicle are honestly not the most pronounced. I kind of wish they went all out and gave Frack some sort of a lime green traditional serpentine vehicle, but instead made it ninja themed. But honestly, I can see why LEGO chose not to do that. Maybe they figured it would be a little bit confusing for kids wanting to get a hero vehicle, but I will say I do like the inclusion of just a few little serpentine elements here and there. The front of the jet clearly is meant to be a serpentine face with fangs and eyes, and you even have a serpentine symbol on the sides to really showcase that this is Frack's jet. Even though in the show it kind of doesn't really have those decals, and it basically just changes hands to different ninja depending on whoever wants to be piloting it at one time. The vehicle, when fully combined, actually does look very solid as a combo vehicle. I really appreciate how it feels like a genuine just standard car by itself. I honestly would not have even expected this to be a transformation or combo vehicle by looking at it, which is actually a good thing. I think the best combo vehicles surprise you in splitting off into vehicles that look good on their own, but also look good combined. If you want to see how that combination feature works, it's super simple. Literally, all you need to do is lift those Technic flaps up. You don't even really need to do that, and then the two bikes separate out. They're attached by a long axle and a Technic pin, and it is as simple as that. No transformation required otherwise. It is very simple, and that's all it takes. The bikes by themselves are really nice because again, they don't feel like they're part of a combo vehicle. They feel like genuinely just good bikes on their own. It is a little bit uninteresting to have you build the identical bike over again, especially for a build as large as this, but I get why they had to do it, and I do appreciate these subtle differences to make them feel like they do belong to each of the different characters. Technically, we are getting a Wildfire specific vehicle here. I guess the Kai's Jet Storm Rider was a Wildfire vehicle in the show, but it really was designed as a Kai set. So this is our first Wildfire vehicle specific set, and then again, it is just part of a combo vehicle. The one thing I do want to call out here is the color scheme. I think the color scheme is really solid here. I love the usage of these Speed Champions wedge elements as the black windscreens. I think that is a really clever touch. The flame yellowish orange or keyed orange inner wheel is really nicely done too, and I love the usage of the dragon jaw on the back of the motorcycle, adding in that Ninjago flavor while still having it be a really cool parts usage for the back of the bike. Altogether, these are really fun to play with. I like how you have these Technic dishes on the side, which kind of act as stabilizers so the bikes don't tip over, but also roll on their own. They kind of feel like stabilizer wheels and just added features to have the elements be shooting out of them. The bikes are very oversized, but also genuinely very fun to play with. And I can see kids having a blast just rolling these around, trying to race them on the floor. They're just really nicely built and very solid. Thankfully, despite them being part of a combo vehicle, there isn't that much exposed Technic, especially compared to some other combo vehicles we've seen in the past. And the same goes mostly for Frax Jet. One thing I do appreciate is they've done their best to hide the Technic pins sticking out of the front by having the panels kind of go over them, which means from most angles you will not see those very ugly blue pins, but then from the underside it is very obvious that those are just pins. But I think it is genuinely a lot of fun to play with. It's very swooshable, as you just saw, and again, you do have those serpentine aspects added into the vehicle. You've got lime eyes for Frax eyes, 2 teeth for the serpentine, and then you have a snake symbol on the side of the jet as well, which is super cool. I actually think it's very nice that Ninjago is giving us a serpentine main hero. It's something myself and I know a lot of other people have been wanting from Ninjago for years, and they're finally delivering on it, which is super cool. Again, I wish that this vehicle pushed it even further in the serpentine direction. I think that just the very small lights at the front aren't really enough, and if you look at what it looks like in the show, it doesn't even have that serpentine front design. It really just has these green lights, so either the show designers didn't want to include it, or they didn't even realize it was supposed to be a serpentine front face. One other thing I will say is that I kind of wish that there was a better way to disguise the pin and axle here. I think they're doing a pretty decent job with the Technic cover panels, but I don't know, it still is very obvious from certain angles, especially when it's landed, so that is a minor con. The other thing that is nice though is that this set does have flick fire missiles. You do have a way to fire out the projectiles here, which is just a nice touch to add on to the play feature, and the inner cockpit is pretty nice as well. You have enough detailing to really make it feel like a ninja vehicle on its own. Taking a look at the inner detail there, you can see that there is just a small graphic that showcases the 2 motorcycles which can be connected up to the jet, and then an image of Frack on the display there, because clearly this is meant to be Frack's jet, which is very cool. They're utilizing a brand new piece introduced for the second half of 2025 just for Ninjago Dragons Rising Season 3, which is this kind of smoke piece on the back here, which is meant to be specifically for this wave of Ninjago, so I do like that they continue to introduce new pieces like that. And then, if you want to see how it all combines, it is super simple. You lift up the 2 wings or flaps of the jet, and then you get the 2 motorcycles and stick them into the Technic holes on the back. Thankfully, it is probably one of the most well-hidden versions of these mechanisms that we've seen. I would say the only vehicle that beats it is the Ultra Stealth Raider in terms of the individual vehicles looking good on their own, while also making a very decent build for the combo vehicle itself. So altogether, I'm pretty positive on this. It's a very simple feature, and I honestly kind of wish it did a little more, maybe having the Technic wings on the back of the jet angle, or just having some sort of extra additional transformation feature, but honestly, it didn't really need it. This model prioritized the aesthetics over functionality, and I appreciate that, especially because the past few combo vehicles have been a little hit or miss. This one definitely feels a lot nicer. But then again, we have to talk about the price. But before we talk about the price, let's take a quick look at the minifigs included in the set. The first minifig here is Cole, and it's a little strange to have him be here because he doesn't really have a place on the vehicle. He kind of is just there, but I do like the design for the Ninja this wave in particular. The dual molded armor is especially nice, and the only thing I will say, as I've said in other reviews, is the big downside is that you basically have no way to turn their heads with this armor on. One of my favorite things to do with my Ninjago minifigures is actually pose them up, have them be looking to the side or in different action poses, and this armor armor, having the mask be built into the armor does not allow you to do that. It's a big shame, and I actually resorted to modifying and cutting off the front pieces of this armor to allow you to actually pose the minifigures in the way that you can see them in the show. And I never cut LEGO pieces, so for me to do that, it's pretty serious. The torso design itself is very nice. I like how he has this sort of gunmetal chainmail armor on the inside of the armor piece there. You've got the symbol for Cole on the back, and then you have some nice details with the dark red being integrated into the color scheme, as well as a bit of dark tan armor. It's a very intricate design this time, but I think it works really well, and I like how the elemental effect of Earth is showcased with the rippling orange kind of rocky boulder design that Cole has on the front of the torso. Altogether, it's a really well done minifig. It just has that armor piece that I really wish they had a better way to do it. Just make the mask be a separate piece, because as it is right now, I really wish that you could pose him more than just looking forward just fully straight. Moving on from that, we can take a look at the next figure, which is honestly not super interesting, and that is Wildfire. For whatever reason, they have decided not to include the armor piece for Wildfire in this year's wave. I don't really know why they did that, because Wildfire has the armor in the show, and they just chose not to include it in any set this wave. I have to wonder if maybe it has to do with the fact that maybe that armor piece is getting discontinued and they're phasing it out. I really don't know. I don't have a good explanation as to why they wouldn't include it for this minifigure, but as it is right now, it is a decent figure. I like the hairpiece, but no armor is a bit unfortunate. Minifigure wise though, the highlight of the set for me is Frack, and honestly, I am very mixed on this minifigure. Here's the thing. I think Frack is one of the best new Dragons Rising characters. I love how full of life he is in the show, how expressive his face is, how he really looks very endearing with his pupils and the way that he has all sorts of different expressions. And all of that is thrown out by a single unprinted dual molded component. I think the idea of Frack wearing a ninja mask and hood is actually a pretty cool one. I like that he has a hood. I feel like it does set him apart and makes him feel like he's part of the ninja team. But they did that by sacrificing his eyeballs. And I don't know what it is with LEGO these days, like maybe they don't really know how to print the serpentine eyeballs on a dual molded piece. I don't really know why, because in the past it didn't really seem to be a problem. They were printing eyeballs just fine on serpentine heads. So to not have eyeballs on Frack is disappointing, and the other thing, not being able to turn his head is also really disappointing. I don't know why they do this, and they basically just have this little extra piece with a kind of like a circle clasp on the front of the torso to prevent you from turning his head back and forth. You really can only have him looking straight forwards, and that is another major con for me. I don't really know why they would design the piece that way, other than maybe my best guess is that they figured that for younger kids, they wanted to have it just super easy to have him looking forwards and not have to figure out which way is forwards, but I don't know. I feel like it would have been really cool to be able to turn his head, and it's an issue that a lot of the other Serpentine have, and it seems like something LEGO purposefully is doing. For a lot of their specially molded headpieces, they're making it such that you cannot spin the heads, and I don't really know why that's the case. I'll have to ask the designers why they do that when I interview them. And altogether, not to keep dogging on Frack, because it is really nice to get a Frack minifigure, but I don't really know about the color scheme. Dark gray isn't really doing it for me when it comes to Frack, and I do like the lime and green detailing, but I feel like Frack could have had maybe just a bit of a better color scheme. I actually kind of like the original suit that he had, which was kind of a trainee G that he had for the first half of Dragons Rising. I would have much preferred getting something closer to that than this. The dark gray body armor isn't really doing it for me. I don't really know, it just doesn't really feel right for the character, and I'm very excited to see where they continue to evolve the look and feel of Frack going forwards. I feel like for the Elemental Master of Quake, I would have loved to see some more earthy elements, maybe some browns or blacks being factored into the color scheme. I don't know, just something more than dark gray. Even gunmetal would have been more interesting. But with that, we can move on to Kai. And Kai is the same as he's appeared in all of the other sets that do include his minifigure, but I will say it is a really well done figure. Again, you have that same issue with the armor piece being just a single dual molded component where you can't twist the head side to side, but otherwise, I do like the design. You've got the rippling orange fire, you've got dark red integrated as well as dark tan, and he does come with a dual molded reveal blade as well, which is a nice touch. It's a really cool component, and one that I'm glad appears in almost every single set of the wave. Actually, I think it appears in every single one, now that I think of it, which is pretty nice to see. He does have that dual molded headband hairpiece introduced for the island, which I think works out great for the character, and he also has that tasseled chain detail, which all the ninja have as well, which I think is a pretty nice touch. Altogether, I think this is one of the stronger minifigures for Dragons Rising Season 3 Part 2. If only you could move the head in that armor. It's just a major flaw in my opinion. Moving onwards to our next minifigure here, we have a Spectral Dragonian Warrior, and this one does come with a mini dragon, although this time it has some claws on the side instead of the wings. Personally, I would have honestly just preferred it come with the wings, because then again we would have been able to armor up fully another Dragonian. Currently, the only fully armored Dragonian with wings is in one set, which is very strange to me, but at least this one does include the dragon. I also really do appreciate the unique look and feel these Spectral Dragonians have this wave. From the transparent legs with printing on the legs, which looks really cool, to transparent arms, as well as the dark blue and gunmetal color scheme of the helmet, I think that this is a really interesting direction to take the Dragonians for this wave. And I also like how when you look at the back of the head, you have that evil looking Forbidden 5 sort of Thunderfang sort of symbol on the back there, which is a really nice touch. Altogether, when you put the armor on, you can even remove the head and put it on backwards to showcase some sort of magical energy or fire breathing through the helmet. This isn't really canon because in the show they just have these as helmets, but I think it is a nice touch to have on the minifigs. And yes, you can choose to put the dragon on the back to maybe have this one have some spikes growing out of the back, which I think is an interesting look, but again, I just would have preferred to have the wings instead. Still, it is nice that this set does include a little Dragonian dragon alongside the main figure itself, because if you do have extra pieces or you want to order those extra wing elements, you can choose to armor this one up if you please. And finally, there is just one other minifigure, but this is one we have seen before, and that is Noct, the Elemental Master of Brute Force. While I would have loved to see spectral versions of the Forbidden 5 because they do look decidedly different in their appearances for this particular second half of episodes as opposed to the first half, I can understand that they just decided it wasn't worth it giving us brand new prints for the Forbidden 5 and they just decided to include the regular versions in the sets. Still, it is a really nice design. I really do think Noct has one of the cleaner Forbidden 5 designs. I was really excited to get Noct this year, especially after his remarkable showing in the Tournament of the Sources last year, so it is always good to get another version of Noct. Although why he doesn't have his cape, I really don't know. It's kind of a strange decision because in the show, he and Rox have their capes, and it almost looks like they initially intended for all the Forbidden 5 members to have capes, but then halfway through they decided not to, which is why the other three don't. So, I don't know, just a weird design choice, but I do think it's a good minifigure nonetheless. But with that, we do have to step back and look at price here. And while I do like this set, I do like it for what it is, $100 is insane. No way this is worth $100. It comes with 561 pieces, which again, price for part is not everything. It really depends on price for value of what you're getting, but even with the big tires, which I get add a little bit of extra budget to a set like this, it does not add $100 worth of budget. I do not understand where that budget is going into. I don't know why this set wasn't $60 or $70. I could even understand, I could defend $70. I would still say it's overpriced, but at $70, maybe. It's a small vehicle. It's not that big of a vehicle. Honestly, I would say $65 is pushing it. Like $60 is where this price should be at. But $100 is baffling to me. I know a lot of folks in the comments say that because I get sets sent to me for free by LEGO, then my opinion on them is pretty biased and not to be trusted. And while I will admit, yes, it's nice to get sets sent to me for free by LEGO, when I'm putting out a review, I have to be as honest as I can. And I am being fully honest here by saying that $100 is a ridiculous price to pay for a set like this. I cannot recommend it at $100. I don't think anybody should be paying $100 for this set. And honestly, I would say wait for a sale. Sometimes Ninjago sets do go on sale, especially if you're located in Europe. Sets go on sale a lot quicker than a lot of sets do here, so honestly, I would just say hold off on buying this one. I can't recommend it full price unless you really have to have Frack right now. And I understand if you do have to. Frack is an amazing character. I just can't justify getting this set for $100. But that's just my opinion. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. Sorry to end this one on a bit of a downer, but at least it's not as bad as the last year's set, which was overpriced and also just not a good set in my opinion. This one is overpriced, but genuinely a pretty fun set to play with. So, you know, we're moving upwards here. Baby steps, you know? Things are getting better. At least this is a fun set to play with, and I do like the minifig selection included.
That's all for this review, so now let's move on to the next set.
Okay, here is set number 71846, the Fire Knight Mech. It is one of two Ninjago Legends sets, a brand new sub-theme of Ninjago geared towards older kids or young adults. It retails for $120 or 120 euros and comes with 996 pieces. The Fire Knight Mech itself, plus a display stand battling one of the monsters from the realm of monsters, and even a civilian for Kai to defend in his mech. It's a really interesting set, and it's one of the Ninjago Legends sets that blends both play and display. It certainly is the most display-oriented mech we've ever seen, but you can still remove it from the stand and fully articulate it, with almost as much articulation as we've seen from stuff like Cole's Titan mech. So this was absolutely on the top of my list of some of the most anticipated sets of this entire year. It's the very first Ninjago mech to have a fabric cape, and even beyond that, there's an extra posing rod which you can attach to the back of the cape to make it look like it's billowing in the wind. A really interesting design. And altogether, it's a very unique design that we haven't really seen for Kai yet, focusing more on dark red and muted colors and bringing in black into the color scheme, as opposed to the normal very bright reds that he typically has. Of course, that is all set to fit the tone of the brand new Ninjago Monstrosity series of shorts, which I'm very excited to be coming out very soon, and I'm really curious to see what this mech looks like in action from those shorts, but of course, we're judging the set itself. Immediately you can see the articulation of the mech, and we'll be taking a look at the articulation at all of the different points when we actually remove it from the stand, but I do want to spend some time with the mech on the display stand first, just showcasing how versatile it is as a LEGO build. The display base is rounded, which is similar to the same one we got in the Guardian Dragon, the other legend set of this wave, and I like how the scene itself is incredibly dynamic. You've got a monster emerging from the waves, a civilian boat being knocked aside, the mech ready to impale the monster with the great big weapon it has, and even one of the tentacles reaching up to wrap around the mech, but the mech's other hand grabbing that tentacle, fighting with it. It feels super dynamic as a scene, and it really does feel like a motion battle come to life, which is super unique and not something we've really ever seen from a Ninjago set before. That's the beauty of these Ninjago Legend sets. This one in particular acts just as good as a playset as it does for display because it does really look like an action scene frozen in place. I love the recolored dragon jaws in pink to make up the jaw of the beast. It almost looks like an octopus style of beak that it has there with a tentacle out of the mouth. There's a printed element being used for the 3 eyes on the creature itself on each side, and then of course you can move around each of the individual tentacles which are mounted on mixel joints or mini ball joints to really just get it in the perfect poses. Although honestly, you can kind of just leave it as is, just as the way you build it, and it looks very good in that sense. I like how everything is very intentional about the build. You have the tentacle wrapping up the longest one, just long enough to be gripped by the arm as the mech is fighting back. You've got the beak or the open mouth and jaw of the creature just as it's getting ready to be impaled by the massive weapon the mech is wielding. And then you have the boat which is toppling over, but one of the tentacles is actually going for the boat as well and curving around it. Even the water itself looks like it's filled with some sort of unique monsters or elements. You've got all these different splashes, the dark murky water, and then some glowing bits and pieces splashing out of the water, suggesting that there may be other creatures lurking within. It's really accomplishing a lot for such a small display base. Removing the mech from the display base, we can take a closer look at what that actually connection point wise looks like. It's just a couple of Technic pins, so it's a very simple setup, but it just is one that works really well. Setting the mech aside though, this is the main focus of the set, and I absolutely love this build. Is it as good as Cole's Titan mech is the big question, and honestly, I don't really think it's fair to compare the two. Cole's Titan mech was a gigantic mech made to push the boundaries of what it was like to build a giant Ninjago mech and max out the articulation. This has similar amounts of articulation, but it's meant to be much smaller, and we'll actually do a direct comparison with Cole's Titan mech near the end of this video, showing them side by side if you're curious to see that. But first, I want to highlight the articulation of this mech. You can move the arms up and down and side to side. It is utilizing the relatively newer style of joint. You can also rotate the elbows rotationally like so, and then the hands themselves are mounted on ball joints. The entire waist is mounted at an angle and does ratchet on a ratchet click joint on the center of the waist, so you can spin that around. Of course, the skirt for the cloth can be moved around as well, and for the legs, you can actually bend the knees, yes, back and forth just on ball joints, which is really nice. It's not using the same knee sliding technique that we got in the Titan mech, but it doesn't really need to. It's not that big of a mech that it necessitates that. Even the feet themselves are mounted utilizing the Bionicle 2006 Titan piston joint, which is really cool. And you do also get lateral motion for the leg itself to allow you to actually splay the legs out as you're moving it back and forth, which is something we've been missing from Ninjago mechs for years, and we literally just saw for the first time in Cole's Titan mech last year. Of course, you can pose it up in all sorts of different arrangements, and I personally had a lot of fun getting this into different poses. One where it's kind of lunging forwards with the weapon. Of course, you can just get it in a standard default pose as well, but there's just a lot of different things you can do with it. And if you're curious, this is what the cape looks like from the back, and we'll be taking a look at the cape without this extra attachment that kind of causes it to fold to the side, so definitely stay tuned if you do want to see the full cape itself. I'm going to try to get it into a standard pose here to just really showcase what you can do in kind of a default sort of pose. You've got the legs just perfectly straight where they should be, just a standard pose right there. You've got the weapon just splayed outwards, and that's what this would look like here. It's a really interesting design, and I love how dynamic it still feels even in this position, thanks to the extra piece to allow the cape to look like it's blowing in the wind. It's a very unique design and not something we've ever seen before from really any LEGO buildable action figure. Bionicle, Exoforce, Knights, or otherwise, this is super unique. That being said, the build isn't perfect. When you're moving around the chest, it's actually really easy to just knock the cockpit off, and that is one of the major cons about this set. It is really easy to just accidentally bump that piece off. It's also just a little bit more fragile in some ways than previous mechs, like the fingers tend to fall off really easily as well because there's no studs in the side connection keeping them together, and it just feels like there are little things about the mech that could have been cleaned up that would have made it perfect with just a few minor adjustments. But the good thing is, it is LEGO after all, so you can make those adjustments if you want. It's also a little bit awkward the way the cape is mounted. It's not super clear if those older style of window panels that go around the cockpit are meant to go underneath the cape, like you can see right now, or above the cape. It isn't really that obvious how that's supposed to go, and the cape itself is very finicky to get into poses. It's certainly the kind of mech that you have to spend a lot of time and energy moving around to make it look good in a pose. But when you make it look good, it really looks good. Like right here, you can actually get it bent down on one knee, which I think is a very cool pose. You can even have it do some sort of a superhero landing like so, which I think is really cool. I couldn't really quite get it to have the fist on the ground in a standard superhero landing without it looking really awkward, but I think as it is right now, that is a very cool pose. And then of course, you can kind of have it saying, "Come here," getting into a battle stance, having the weapon be ready to attack, and all of that is accomplished by the lateral movement for the upper parts of the legs. I think that is actually a really underrated part of mech posing that we haven't really seen that often from other LEGO mechs that really hold them back from being as posable as they could be. So this is really nice. They did even manage to include that level of articulation, especially in a set like this, which isn't nearly as big or complex as something like the Cole's Titan mech. They still were able to pull it off. Taking a look at the rest of the joints here, of course, you do have those Bionicle 2006 piston joints. Look what they need to do to mimic a fraction of Bionicle 2006's power. But listen, I get it. You're not using prefab leg pieces here. Every single piece here is brick built, so it's gonna be a lot more difficult to make it stable as opposed to some of those other Bionicle sets we used to get. One thing I do want to talk about that I haven't really touched on so far is aesthetics. I've been talking so much about the functionality, I do want to step back and talk about the color scheme a bit, because I love the color blocking of this set. The dark red looks really good, and I like how the bright red is used very sparingly, almost like the Under Armour, like the armor gets darker as it goes out. Once again, just like the Guardian Dragon, it's using a very tasteful amount of gold. It's not too much that it's overwhelming, and with the extra bar removed, here's what that cape looks like on the back, and that looks so cool. I am a sucker for mechs or robots that wear cloaks, and this is absolutely one that works so well. I love the hexagon-like design, showcasing that maybe it's some sort of a technological weave, and yet it also feels ancient with the symbol on the back. It feels like a really cool blend of old and new, and that's one of my favorite parts about the set itself. Of course, you could get it into all sorts of great poses with the cape sort of just hanging in its normal position, and honestly, I almost like it even better without the extra bar. I think the bar really works when you actually want it in a dynamic pose, just like this one right here, where it's blowing in the wind, arms are out, it's ready for battle, but for just a standard action pose, I think it looks totally fine just not having the cape have that bar attached. And the good thing is, you can do whatever you want with it. They even include extra holes that are unused on the bottom of the cape in case you want to use it for something else, like a sail for a boat at some point in a future mock, which I'm sure some people are going to immediately do as soon as they get their hands on this. Altogether, this is a remarkably posable vehicle. It is definitely one of the most aesthetically cool mechs we have gotten from Ninjago so far, in my opinion. I love the usage of the new element they introduced for Dragon's Rising Season 3 Part 2 for this wave as well, for a plume on the top of the head that almost looks like a trail of fire or smoke billowing out at the top of the head as well. It's really well done, and even small details like the dangling lantern that slowly sways back and forth every time you move it on a very short chain just very much work towards its favor, and you can get this in such cool poses. Honestly, this may be one of my favorite Ninjago mechs of all time. But the mech is only part of the set, and I do also want to spend some time taking a look at the base, because the display base itself is genuinely a pretty cool build too. You have some water elements, you have a bit of a fortress or some sort of broken apart rockwork. I like that it's mounted at an angle, again, making it feel much more dynamic than just a standard base, and while the base is not necessarily as detailed or as beautiful looking as the Guardian Dragon's base, it is very dynamic in the way it's set up. You've got the monster emerging from the water, you've got the boat being tipped over, you even have a clip on the back of the minifigure to show the hat falling off of his head. Everything about this is incredibly dynamic. But now, I want to do a quick comparison between two of my favorite Ninjago mechs now, Cole's Titan Mech and Kai's Fire Knight Mech. Obviously, the difference in scale is extreme. Cole's Titan Mech is a lot bigger than the Kai Fire Knight Mech, and that honestly makes a lot of sense to me. It totally should be a lot bigger as a Titan Mech, and one day I hope we do get a full-on Kai's Titan Mech, because we haven't gotten that yet. I'm sure we're gonna get it as like a big flagship set for one of the final years of Dragon's Rising. Heck, we might even get it next year for all I know. But for now, this is a really good alternative because it has about as much articulation, and you can even swap the weapons back from one to the other because the hand design is almost the same. The one thing I will say is Cole's Titan Mech is a little bit better because the hands and fingers are just tightened up a lot better for Cole's Titan Mech. They've got a studs in the side bracket which keeps the fingers in place, which unfortunately is not present for the Fire Knight Mech, which is why, as I mentioned, the fingers fall off a lot more easily. That being said, it is really cool to be able to have each mech wield each other's weapons. I think it genuinely is a really good pair to compare the two, and you can just see the size differences there, even though the amount of articulation is about the same. But now let's get this back on the stand. So to get this back on the stand, basically what you have to do is you actually kind of have to remove the weapon pieces and reverse it to allow you to be moving the weapon down. It's just a very simple change, but it just makes it look a lot better when you have that stickered part on the outside of the weapon be facing the main view of the angle, and then you move one of the legs up, straighten up the other one, and get it into a pose that looks good on the base. The base itself is actually really dynamic. There's a lot of poses you can accomplish with this mech on the base, and honestly, it wiggles back and forth a lot. You can choose your movement, which is good, I think, but it also means that you can very easily get it in a very awkward pose that you don't want it to be in, or a pose that just doesn't look good. I've seen people online who have already taken a look and built this, who have gotten it in all sorts of different poses, so you can accomplish a lot of different things with just this base, but for me, I think the best pose is how it appears on the box art. So you kind of have it angled upwards a little bit, splay the leg out. Again, you can see I'm getting a lot of play here in terms of being able to move the item around and move the mech in all sorts of different positions. And then, of course, you get it so one hand is grasping the tentacle like it's fighting back against the tentacle monster. Then you have the other hand with the spear that's using to eventually destroy the monster once and for all, send it to the departed lands, or I guess the spectral lands now. And it's just really cool. Again, pretty quick to get it back on the stand, but if you want it to look really good, you definitely do want to play around with the details a little bit. One thing I wanted to mention about the details is I love the way the kneecaps are done. The triple spiked prongs atop the knees to really make it look like it's wearing boots just looks really, really cool. And altogether, the aesthetics for this model are so good. It is generally one of the best looking Ninjago models that we have ever gotten, and I'm a big fan of this one. So, all that to say is I'm actually a really big fan of this Legend set. Dare I say I actually like it a bit better than the Guardian Dragon. And don't get me wrong, I love the Guardian Dragon for what it is, but it is purely a display piece, and I don't mind that, but I just love how you can use this as both a display and a play piece. As I said so many times throughout this review, you can remove the mech and just play around with it. It acts like a normal Ninjago mech, but you can also just leave it on display and it looks probably better than any of your other mechs on display just because of the way it's built. It's just really well done as a set overall, and massive kudos to the designers for pulling this off. The only thing is the price of $120 does feel a little steep for what you get. Again, the mech is not that large. You saw the comparison with Cole's Titan mech, which was actually cheaper than this, and Cole's Titan mech is a good torso taller than this one. That being said, yes, that was an anomaly. Like, that set was oddly well priced. I don't think we're ever going to set price that well, so I don't think it's very fair. But I will say, the base itself is nice, but doesn't add a ton of pieces to the set, and I definitely feel like I would have preferred this set to basically be just $100 instead of $120. I think it would have been just a lot more easier for me to recommend this amazing set at $100 at full price as opposed to $120, where I would say it's okay value, but not that great. So it definitely is up to your own judgment. The set does come with an exclusive poster, which is pretty nice. It's not that big of a poster, it's basically the size of like a printer paper, so honestly, I kind of was expecting a little bit more when they said poster. In previous LEGO sets, they've done some really big posters from like Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff like that back in 2011, but no, this one was just a piece of paper, but the artwork does look really nice, and I hope that they release that artwork digitally sometime. Moving onwards to the final part of the review, I do want to take some time to look at the minifigures, starting off with Kai here, who funnily enough is just marketed as Master of Fire in this set. We do know that this mech will be piloted by a previous Elemental Master of Fire in Ninjago Monstrosity, but this is obviously Kai, so I don't really know why they marketed him as Master of Fire. But altogether, it's a really beautiful minifigure. I love the dark red color scheme. The dragon, Source Dragon emblem on the back is really nice, and it's cool to get a recolor of the reveal blade in gold and gunmetal gray. The torso itself is really unique. It kind of feels like a special variation of the Kai minifigure, sort of like how we got a mech Cole, and that was completely different than other versions of the character we've gotten, but this one feels very traditional. I could even see it being used on like a Sensei Kai style of figure. The only thing that really throws me off here is the usage of the hairpiece with bandana, to be honest. I think if the bandana was maybe dark red or even black, if they recolored that hairpiece, it would have been a lot better, but as it is right now, the bright red just kind of stands out from the rest of the suit being predominantly a darker shade. But I still do like the minifigure overall. Moving on to the civilian, this is pretty much just utilizing pieces that we have seen across a ton of different sets before, so it's not really using anything new. I do kind of find it funny how it's using the technically unofficial official Tooth Domino's Neek head, which was introduced in Hidden Side, and I think that's a pretty good one because he basically is kind of the grandfather of all sorts of Ninjago mechs now as the designer of Cole's Titan mech, and I also really like how it has that neck bracket to make it look like the hat is falling off of his head. It's really well done. Love the sand green color scheme as well. It's a nice torso and leg piece, and it's just a really cool additional figure to get for Kai to rescue in this set. And with that, we have summed up my thoughts on Kai's Fire Knight mech. This is a beautiful Ninjago set. It is maybe one of my favorite mechs of all time. I'm gonna have to go back and at some point go through a new list of the best mechs that LEGO has made, but this is probably in the top 5, I would say. It's definitely below Cole's Titan mech. It's maybe below Cole's mech from the Ninjago movie because that one was just so unique with a gigantic wheel instead of legs. But this is easily maybe number 3, and that is very high praise because I own every single mech LEGO has ever made. So having built them all, for this to be in my top 5 is very good.
That's all for this review, so now let's move on to the next set.
Alright, this is 71847 The Guardian Dragon. It's part of a new sub-theme of sets called Ninjago Legends, which is launching this year, focusing on more adult-oriented or at least older kid-oriented Ninjago display sets, which is something that they've never really done before with Ninjago, and certainly a concept I am very excited to see them explore. This set in particular is the larger of the two, retailing for $150 or 150 euros, and it comes with 1,650 pieces, which is actually pretty good value, at least on paper. Of course, a lot of those pieces do go into making very minute and small details to the rock work, the ground, the waterfall, all the different bits and pieces of the trees, and even some small spines growing out of the back of the dragon, but that's pretty much to be expected in a set like this, which is purely oriented towards display rather than with play. In fact, this set is actually a little bit controversial because the dragon itself, basically what you see is what you get. There is no way to remove it from the stand, there is no way to really pose it other than wiggling the arms around a little bit and moving the head from side to side as we're about to see throughout the course of this video. It basically is just a statue, for better or for worse. For me personally, I'm actually really happy that Ninjago is branching out and doing something unique like this. We have gotten so many amazing dragons from Ninjago that are play models that you can pose, so it's actually really cool to see Ninjago attempt something a little bit different and give us something that is purely meant for display. This really feels more like something I would see as a mock, or maybe something I would see at a LEGO convention as opposed to a LEGO set, in all the right ways. It really does feel unique compared to everything else from Ninjago's portfolio. But I also can totally understand the people who kind of see this and are a little bit disappointed because they want a dragon that you can actually play with, a dragon you can actually pose, and not even the wings move at all here. It is literally a statue, so make of that what you will. It's certainly not for everyone, but for me, I think it is a really cool and exciting new direction to take Ninjago. Obviously, the playsets aren't going anywhere. The core of Ninjago is going to be kids play, but they're trying out a few things as the audience grows up with the theme. And it's things like this that we haven't really seen any other original LEGO theme do, just because Ninjago has the longevity to really provide all sorts of offerings for different age ranges and age groups, allowing the older fans to retain their interest while still providing things for newer and younger fans to enjoy. It's a nice balance. Speaking of though, let's jump into the build itself. I really love the color scheme of this set. It's utilizing a mix between the spring green color, the regular bright green, as well as the standard green, plus the tan for the underbelly of the dragon, little bits of tasteful gold. I never really like it when Ninjago goes full gold. It tends to be a little bit too gaudy and flashy, but the gold used here is actually used very tastefully. And of course, one of my favorite parts of the actual model is the fact that it has this whole display base along with it. Much like the Fire Knight mech, which is also another legend set in this series, you have a bit of terrain that the dragon is perched on top of, which presumably is meant to depict a part of the realm of monsters, although honestly this terrain seems very friendly, and I could definitely imagine the terrain itself not really being canon to its appearance in the storyline, and this is just something they wanted to include to make it feel like a nice and tranquil set. So, starting off with the base here, we have a new version of Master Wu, which we're going to take a look at in a little bit near the end of the video as we dive into the minifigs. You've got the rocks, some trees growing out around the rocks, and then this massive dragon sculpture perched above it. I love how dynamic the dragon is, how it feels like it's in motion with the moving legs, and you've got the arms that can be posed around. There's a lot to love here. But putting our attention onto the ground, I really appreciate the amount of effort that went into depicting stuff like the rockwork, or even this little gateway that Master Wu is walking through. It feels very Japanese inspired. You've got all these little lights and little statues scattered throughout the build, and a really nice waterfall trickling down from the side of it as well. One of my favorite details is that you can see the water bubbling up as the waterfall is falling down. It's tucked away in the back section of the build, so they really didn't need to do it, but it's kind of just there for the folks who built the set to really appreciate, seeing that where the water is hitting the pool, there are little splashes and bits of water bubbling up. There's a small bit of a shrine over here as well, with some candles that have dripped and melted all the way down to their roots, as well as a little bit of an Easter egg there, which kind of looks like the suit that we've seen in the trailers for Ninjago Monstrosity that Kai is wearing with the hat and mask, or maybe that could be an original Elemental Master of Fire, although the hat is a little bit different. We'll see if that is actually going to be something story relevant in the new shorts that are coming out. Of course, they did decide to recolor the reveal blade as a bit of a collectible for this set and the other one in the gold and gunmetal gray as opposed to gold and transparent red as we've seen it for the other sets. And as we move upwards to the rock, you can see all sorts of great details. A tree with a recolored dragon horn element in brown to showcase the tree trunk with some lanterns hanging off of the tree. You've got the rockwork utilizing great studs on the side techniques to really build up the rockwork here, and all of that transitions very nicely to the dragon itself, which is perched on one leg and the other, kind of each gripping one part of the rock. One of the legs is ever so slightly bent, and it all just comes together to make a really beautiful display piece. They're utilizing some techniques that we actually saw in the modular Ninjago city sets to hint at depth beneath the layers of water, even in something this small, and that's something I really appreciate. But now let's move on to the dragon itself. A lot of people are curious about articulation for this model, and unfortunately that is definitely the weakest part of the set. Compromises were made in articulation to make this look good, and I think those are acceptable compromises. If you're getting a display model like this, I'm not expecting it to have the craziest articulation. I'm expecting it to look good on display. But because of that, you can really barely move the arms around. I guess you can kind of raise it up and down, but the way it's actually integrated here is that they've got this buildable character superhero's armor element for the shoulder armor, which does a really good job to cover up the joint there and make it feel not very mechanical, but it also does severely restrict the range of motion. You can bend the Hero Factory Invasion from Below claws, colored in green on the sides of the lower arms outwards, but there's not really much visual difference that will give you. And of course, the legs themselves cannot move. There's nothing you can do. The tail is mounted on mixel joints, but it's really not meant to move. It's kind of just meant to stay there. And the only other movement that you actually get is in the neck and the head, mostly in the head. The neck itself, you can kind of bend up and down, and the head can sway side to side and back and forth, but since they're mounted on two different mixel joints to mount it at a very specific angle, this is the extent to the range of motion you can get out of the neck. Just looking up and down in a very particular angle. You can't move it side to side or anything like that, because it's fully covered up. All of the joints are very protected, and the articulation is limited because of that. As for the head itself, the dragon is utilizing a brand new mold they introduced for Dragon's Rising Season 3. We see this appear in 3 different sets, one for the front piece of the Destiny's Bounty, one for Ronto, the Master Dragon, and then one for this one, the Guardian Dragon here. You have a brick-built mouth underneath, which I actually think looks pretty good, and my favorite part of the head is this glowing halo or ring of fire above the head itself. I think it's such a mystical and unique feature, and as we can see from the artwork, this isn't like a crown the dragon is wearing. It's actually some sort of a glowing magical symbol atop the dragon head, and the horns arc around it. It's just a very unique and detailed fantasy element to this design, which I absolutely love. Another thing I really do want to call out with the construction of the building techniques here is that different elements were used to depict scales arcing and kind of folding around each other. I love the color gradient from bright green to regular green to dark green along the sides of the legs, where you can see they're utilizing the LEGO Nexo panel elements to really showcase these large scales, making up the outer sides of the legs, which showcase the color gradient, which is also something that extends to the printing on the wings. The wings themselves are actually produced very nicely. They're utilizing these fabric components, which are very, very easy to move around. They're very light and breathable, and it's the same components being used in the Destiny's Bounty that is also coming out in this wave, so it really does feel very high quality. And now, I do want to take a step back and talk a little bit about the value of this set. You are paying $150 for one minifigure and a gigantic dragon display, 1,650 pieces, and it does come with an extra poster as well, which we'll take a look at in a second. I do think a lot of the impressiveness of this design and a lot of the wow factor does come from the wings, which can be a little deceptive because obviously the wings themselves are really, really large, and they definitely do not take up that many pieces. It's not really that complex to build them. Would I have preferred brick build wings for something like this? I think it would have been interesting, but honestly, I really do love the fabric wings because I feel like they were able to go all out with the rest of the dragon and the display without having to compromise on the price or make the price way too expensive like brick built wings would have done. And honestly, fabric probably looks better anyways, so I'm actually pretty happy with that decision, even though I do know that that is absolutely adding on to the wow factor of the set and making it feel more impressive than maybe it actually is. As far as the rest of the set is concerned, I am a big fan of the direction they've taken for this. I know not everyone is going to love a set like this, which doesn't mean you can remove the dragon, you can't really pose it on 4 legs, there are really no joints in there whatsoever, it is literally built into the stand. It might not look like it, but there's a lot of solid technic construction to attach this to the stand, and there isn't any sort of way to remove it very easily. So all in all, this is very purely a display model. There is nothing you can do with the dragon outside of putting it on display. And I do not think that's a bad thing, but I understand if people want a dragon you can play with and also looks good, don't get this, spend the same amount of money for the Source Dragon of Motion. That, in my opinion, is the best Ninjago dragon. It's also the biggest, and it is one that you can play around with. You can play around and articulate the head, the legs, the tail, the wings. The wings have multiple joints in them. That is absolutely what I would recommend if you want a play scale dragon that also looks really good. But this is maybe the best looking dragon they've ever done, and because of that, it is just fully a display model. And I'm glad Ninjago is branching out and doing something unique like this, which is absolutely a lot more geared towards adults. I really appreciate that because it means a theme is growing up with the audience. The set does also include this poster, which is actually a really cool piece of artwork. I love how you can see that sort of magical detail of the fire and the horns above the head is glowing. It's a really great depiction of Master Wu as well. It's a really beautiful piece of artwork here, and I just love the way that this set has been translated into a more realistic looking appearance. And speaking of Wu, let's wrap up this review by taking a look at the minifigure in detail. The Master Wu minifigure is utilizing the same armor piece they're using for Zane in his spectral suit, who is also coming in the Temple Bounty. It's a brand new dual molded component with a dragon head on one side and some sort of bamboo armor on the other side, which just looks really good. My one big complaint about the piece is the same complaint I've had about pretty much all of the detailed dual molded armor pieces we've gotten in the last few years, and that's the fact that the mask is built into the armor, which means that you cannot twist the character's head. You can't really pose them in a more dynamic way because you basically have to have them purposefully always looking straight forwards. That being said, it probably bothers me the least on a character like Wu. Because with Wu in particular, it doesn't really matter that you can't turn his head. You never were really able to turn Wu's head anyway because he always had that big beard, so it's not that big of a deal. It really reminds me of the dragon suit that Wu got all the way back in Hunted and again in Crystallized, where he wore the dragon armor, but it's even cooler in my opinion because of course the armor is dual molded. We do actually get a brand new head print for Wu as well. The only thing I think is missing on this one is it would have been really nice to see that ponytail on the back of his head, which we got in the Season 11 headpiece for Wu, but they seem to have reverted back to the older style of design. I do like the expression though. I think the somewhat angry expression or very stern and serious with the eyes slanted just works very well for Master Wu. And obviously, this outfit is probably not going to appear in the TV show unless they do some sort of a flashback or maybe bring him back in some way. We don't really know what's going on with Wu in Dragon's Rising, but I still think it is a really nice outfit. I love the dark red, which kind of ties it into the ninja suits for the entire wave, makes it almost feel like he's wearing a ninja suit alongside the rest of the characters, right down to the tassel as well, and it's just a really intricate design for the character. The tan on the chest is really great as well. I love the golden belt, the dark red boots, everything about the figure is very well produced, so I'm a big fan of this one. And with that, we have summed up my review of the brand new LEGO Ninjago Guardian Dragon. There's a lot to say about this one, and I'm really curious to see if Ninjago Legends is received well. It certainly does seem like it is. What sorts of sets are we going to get in the future when it comes to Ninjago Legends? What other things do you think they could produce like this? I am sure they could do something really cool, like kind of like a Destiny's Bounty, but maybe some sort of like a sailing boat depicted here. They could even do a building or a city like this, and of course more dragons and more mechs in the Ninjago Legend style would be super cool. I wouldn't even mind them going back to maybe some older seasons and doing something like a Ninjago Legends Great Devourer. You know, give us the gigantic serpent wrapped around a building. I think that would be a really amazing set and a great display piece, and the possibilities are totally endless for sets like this.
That's all for this review, so now let's move on to the next set. Here it is. 71848 is the Temple Bounty, based off of Ninjago Dragons Rising Season 3 Part 2. It contains 2,387 pieces and will retail for $200 or 200 euros when it releases on August 1st here in the US and June 1st pretty much everywhere else in the world. As I said in the intro, this is one of the most anticipated Ninjago sets yet, and for good reason. The Temple Bounty is our first gigantic full-scale bounty that we've gotten in a while, and especially after the relatively disappointing Dragons Rising Season 1 version of the bounty, which we got just a couple of years back, fans have been clamoring for a full-on return-to-form, gigantic-scale bounty, and this set absolutely delivers. I find it really interesting because this draws a lot of inspiration from the layout, to the sails, to the way that it's all set up, to the Ninjago movie version of the Destiny's Bounty, which was priced and pieced similarly compared to this one, but of course does its own thing with a lot of ties to the current season of Ninjago. There's a lot to get into here, so we're gonna take this piece by piece. There is actually a display stand featured for the set, which allows you to kind of tilt it like it's taking flight, which I find to be really interesting. That's one of my favorite parts of the model, and for the first time in any bounty, you actually have a really interesting dragon headpiece near the front of the ship, which showcases the red dragon head sort of snaking over the top of the ship, and then manifesting in a smaller form near the top of the ship instead of the front of the ship itself, which is a pretty controversial decision, and maybe the only part of this model that isn't quite perfect for me. Otherwise though, I love this model. The color scheme is super refined and interesting. It's a lot darker than previous versions of the bounty, leaning heavily on the blacks and the dark reds and even the browns kind of mixing all together. Whereas most versions of the bounty have been very bright red, this one has much more muted colors. It feels a bit more realistic compared to some of the other bounties, and I really love these spectral lanterns hanging from the sides of the ship, tying it into the Spectral Lands quest that the ninja are setting off on in Season 3 Part 2. Altogether, it is a really remarkably well done model, and there's a lot of interior detail. In fact, there's so much interior space, it might actually have some of the most interior space out of any bounty so far, and that is absolutely a bonus. But we're going to start off by taking a look at the outside of the ship, just calling out little things that I really appreciate about it. I like how there's a lot of deck space, how you can actually access the interior by lifting up some of the decks, and the only downside to the upper parts of the sails is that they really only look good from one angle. We'll be revisiting that in a little bit, but honestly it doesn't detract too much from the model for me, especially because the material used for the sails is pretty instrumental in the transformation feature, which you're about to see right here. Twisting a knob on the back allows the wings and winglets on the side of the ship to open and close up, which actually folds the cloth altogether, which is the very first time a Destiny's Bounty set has done that for the flight transformation feature. A lot of the previous iterations have done stuff with moving plastic components, or even just having the top sails move, but this is the first time we are actually getting these sails folding in and out, and I actually think that is a really nice touch. It makes it feel more realistic, the way that they furl outwards. I really like how neatly they fold up as well, pretty much just fully closed up behind the actual sails there, and my apologies, you'll notice that in one of these videos, one of the sails has kind of fallen off of the hooks here, which is something that does happen. If you open and close it a ton, it can tend to kind of disengage from those mixel joint holders there, so you just have to be careful and just put it back on, because you do need the sails attached on every single point to actually allow it to close up nicely. But as it is, it's a really cool play function, and easily one of my favorite play functions that we've gotten for the flight mode of a bounty, because it really feels like you're unfurling some sails. Of course, moving our gaze up to the upper part of the sails, they do look really good from one angle, and that is the one thing I do kind of wish they made different from the older movie bounty. I wish they had a way for the sails to look good on both sides, maybe just having the sails have an alternate version on the side, or just figuring out a way to print these on both sides, which they haven't really seemed to have figured out how to do. The decals though are really nice. I love the dragon scale design on the side of the sails, and all the stickers as well are very elegant and nicely done.
The temple bounty text is written very nicely on the side, although honestly, I might have preferred that to have been written in Ninjago instead of just standard text. Although it's not that big of a deal, it still looks really good. Moving over to some of the decals on the back of the ship, another one of my favorite stickers is this dragon decal back here. You can see that the dragon spines are actually referencing the first realm dragon spinjitzu gimmicks that we got in the first half of this year, which is really nice to see that gimmick actually being referenced on the back of the bounty, which further cements this as being very Dragon's Rising Season 3 focused. The only thing that really throws me off about this set is honestly the way the dragon mount is done for the head. I don't mind the fact the dragon arcs throughout the ship, I actually think it is a pretty nice touch, but it feels just very tacked on. It feels very small compared to the rest of the ship, it's super skinny, and honestly I would have preferred if they just had done away with that entire look and decided to put a large dragon head in the front of the ship instead. Having that be fully brick built as a giant centerpiece I feel like would have really cemented this ship as one of the most solid bounties, but as it is right now, I'm just not the biggest fan of the way they pulled off the dragon. I'm about to share a very minor detail from some of the early release episodes of the show, so if you don't want to know about those at all, please just skip ahead to a further timestamp, but looking at how this looks like in the show, it is very strange because the actual animation model does have a giant dragon head on the front, and honestly, it makes the model look a lot better. It is really weird that maybe that was something that was considered in development. Sometimes these animation models are based off of prototypes or unfinished models, so it is especially strange if they were in fact planning a large-scale dragon head, but then just decided not to, especially because it literally looks better in the show because it has that large dragon head. But I guess we may never know. Going back to the ship though, let's take a look at the stand underneath, which is actually a really nice touch. I feel like this model in particular really bridges the gap between a play model and a display model, and that's absolutely something they wanted to get across by putting this together. There's a very simple black display stand that rests right underneath the model, which is actually built in a more clever way than you'd imagine because they actually include room for you to scoop it up so you can grab the entire bounty and sort of keep the stand attached at the same time. There's room for your fingers underneath, and it is very intuitive as to how to pick this up even with the stand underneath it, which is something I really appreciate. And especially for folks who want to put this on display on their desk, it looks really good angled forwards and upwards. Taking a look at some of the extra side details, I love the inclusion of the relatively new F1 collectible series handles to use as the anchors there. It's really nicely done. And then, of course, it's time to take a look at the interior. One thing I will say about this model, it is pretty fragile, especially compared to a lot of standard LEGO items. While I'm just removing some of these components, things are falling apart, they're splitting open, and honestly, again, it feels like this could have just done with a few more iterations in the pipeline, especially because it is so close to being the perfect model, but there's just a couple of things holding it back, but more on that fragility in a little bit. First off, you can see just how many sections actually come off for you to be able to take a look at the interior of the vessel, and let's look at that interior right now, because there are so many details packed inside this boat. With all the temples and buildings removed, it actually does have a pretty decent profile, but of course, let's now take a look at the interior of the ship. And that is what that stand looks like if you were curious. Taking a look first at the front of the ship, it's pretty compact here, but they really are taking the most advantage of space. You've got a little training dummy up there, a weapons rack, even some places to store katanas, and a few stickers which showcase paintings. One of which showcases a monastery up in the clouds, which doesn't really look like the monastery of Spinjitzu, but maybe that's what it's supposed to be. And then the other one showcasing the 4 weapons blacksmith, which is very clearly meant to be that shop, which I think is a really nice touch. That's not the only Ninjago 2011 reference here, and as the theme gears up to its 15th anniversary, it makes total sense that we're starting to see these appear as references in more and more sets. Going through a circular doorway from the front section will get you into the main corridor of the ship, and there's a lot to be seen here. One thing I do want to point out though is that the construction to attach the front parts of the ship, which you see the weapons attached to, is a little bit flimsy. I don't think it's gonna fall off, but it wobbles just enough for me to be worried. Moving into the main section, there are some nice details like a little bonsai tree as well as a sticker with Aaron and baby Ryu. There's a reference to Fritz Donegan the Starfarer, as well as the rebooted spaceship, which you can see right there. Pretty cool to see that on a video game console. And you also have a whole area dedicated to serving sushi, so it looks like they kind of have a restaurant on board, which certainly is very different compared to other versions of the bounty, and something I really appreciate. Going on to the other side, there's a nice little table with some floor seats which you can sit on to eat your sushi, and then there are some nice little references like Pixel and Zane showcased in a photograph there, as well as Master Chen's delicious noodles, an advertisement for Master Chen's noodles on the side of the ship there, plus a dragon's rising pendant and a heart. As we move into our next cabin here, again, you have a nice circular door, you have some sleeping areas as well as some shelves for the ninja. You can see there's a reference to the store as seen in the Ninjago City Workshop set, showcasing Kai's climber mech on the same style of box that we saw many times throughout that store of stickers, which is pretty nice to see that actually being replicated in a different set on this item here, which is very, very cool. And then on the other side, you have an alarm clock and a small lamp, and yes, the alarm clock does read 2011, which was the launch year for LEGO Ninjago. This is definitely the most bare bones part of the ship, and that makes sense because a lot of the interior space here is taken up by the mechanism to actuate the flying function of the sails. You can see it is actually remarkably simple in the way it's done. You basically have these two knobs which kind of link up with each other, and they cause each side to open and close. Let me just reattach the sail here so you can see exactly how that's supposed to look. As you go ahead and close it up, you can see it folds very neatly away, and then you open it up and you have it actually without really any wrinkles. One of my concerns upon seeing this was that would you be wrinkling the cloth pieces by doing this, but thankfully this, as well as the Guardian Dragon set, uses a specialized cloth material we've seen a couple of times before, but it's very lightweight, you can fold it in all sorts of different positions, and it doesn't really crease, which is really nice, and definitely something that feels very high quality as it's put together. But now let's put all of the different floor sections back one by one and take a look at what you can do there. Placing the first part of the temple bounty on, you can see that this is a very small room, and honestly, despite the fact that this is the temple bounty and there are a lot of temple-sized rooms, most of them don't really have that much going on. Most of the interior detail is hidden on the inside of the ship. This room literally just has a sextant mounted on the front of the boat, but really nothing else, and that is one of my minor complaints about how this ship is done. It's actually really flimsy in its construction. As you can see here, this upper section is only attached by two studs. That's right, both the roof and the top sail only are held on by two studs, and I guess that would make sense if it was meant to be removable, but it's really not meant to be removable. So that way when you're swooshing it through the air, or if you lift it up wrong, it just will fall off, and that does feel like a very strange miss in terms of the design to me. I don't really know why these weren't attached on a much more secure manner. As you can see, as I'm moving around the item here, it is really easy to just have it fall out of place and fall over. And it's a bit disappointing for a set this expensive and this large to have very flimsy aspects like that. It's not that big of a deal, and as long as you're very careful with it, it won't cause that big of a problem, but it is just something I did want to point out. Going on to the main deck here, one thing I do appreciate about the set is that there actually are easy ways to access the interior without having to remove all the levels. As you can see, you can open up these dark tan doors here, and they act as floorboards, which showcase the way to access the interior part of the ship. It's a nice touch, but it also means that this is once again a pretty flimsy section because a lot of it is just doors that are able to open up. Going to the back cabin, this is another area where there is a little bit of an interior, but honestly there's not that much going on. You can use the reveal blades, which were prismatic steel blades recrafted in the realm of Imperium, to be able to hold the blades over this map and reveal some hidden details. Of course, you can see like a Thunderfang sort of design lurking in the Well of Souls in the Spectral Lands and a map to go through them. And then as you raise this up, there's actually a pretty nice command console here, showcasing the way to unfurl the sails, some targets on the radar, and a couple of extra lights. It's very basic for what it is, but I do appreciate that they did have at least some sort of a console on the inner section here. There's a couple of other small details like a gold trophy as well as a little bit of a food box or a tea box, but other than that, not much else to see in this interior section, and mostly it just lifts up to be able to cover up the bottom base of the set. Moving on to the next layer here, this is the steering wheel, and that is basically it. Aside from the steering wheel plus a small grate to allow you to access this upper level, there's not much else to see here. There's a telescope sticking out of the back, sort of similar to the original movie Destiny's Bounty, but otherwise this is a very, very basic part of the set, and yes, it does suffer from the same issue as the front part, in that the sails and the roof on the top of this building are just mounted by two studs. You can see how wobbly it was as I just moved it back and forth, and how easily that just comes off in my hands. Maybe this is just bothering me more than the average person, but I don't really know. It was very, very weird for me to build this and then just keep on accidentally knocking off the sails or knocking off the roof as I moved it around. I wasn't even being that rough with it, and it definitely is a major con of the set to me. Otherwise, once this is fully put together, you do have to appreciate the building techniques and the aesthetics of this ship. One of my favorite details are the usage of these studs on the side techniques with the relatively newer 1x2 slope elements introduced for Speed Champions last year to actually have these dark red slits on the front of the ship. You've got these brand new elements that are kind of like clouds or ghostly trails going along the side of the ship and on the back of it, which are new for summer 2025, specifically for the Ninjago theme, and altogether, it's just a really well done model. You even have a recolor and a reprint of the brand new Ninjago mini dragon head, which we'll also see in the Guardian Dragon shown at the front of the ship here, although again, I really do wish they decided to either brick build or mold a large dragon on the front of the ship, because I think that would have made it look a lot better. Altogether though, I am very, very happy with this set. The mechanism is incredibly satisfying and it's very unique compared to all of the other bounty mechanisms, especially when they've been a little hit or miss in recent history. Some are really good and some are just not that interesting, but this one works really well. And now it's time to take a look at the minifigure selection. The minifigs in this set are interesting, to say the least. Nia and Zane are exclusive to the set, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. We'll talk about that later. It does include Wildfire, which is nice because she is actually the pilot of the ship in the show. It's our second copy of Cole from the entire wave, our third copy of Rogue J. Actually, that would be the fourth if you count the one in the 4+ set with a different style of hat. And then you have Zarked, the Forbidden 5 member, who is basically just facing off against the world here. You know, he's really the Forbidden Fraud after his very weak showing and shameful display in Dragon's Rising Season 3 Part 1, but it kind of adds on to the meme that, like, the worst member of the Forbidden 5 is the only one facing off against the ninja in this giant set. Altogether, it's very swooshable. The only other thing I wish could have been changed were that if there was a way to modify the sails to at least angle them forwards a little bit, like what we see in the show, the sails are kind of angled slightly to allow you to make it look like it's catching the wind, I think that would have been a really, really nice touch just to make it feel a bit more realistic in flight. But as it is very, very fun to swoosh around my room, and of course, I already have it mounted to the ceiling, flying high above with the rest of the sets, because it is something that just looks really, really good on display hanging above my ceiling. But now, let's take a closer look at the minifigures, and then we'll close out with my overall thoughts on the value of this set as a whole. We're going to start off with Zane here, who is exclusive to this set. This suit is actually non-canon since Zane is largely absent throughout Dragon's Rising Season 3 Part 2, but it is a very, very nice suit. The highlight is the dragon armor. It's a new dual molded component which showcases a dragon head alongside some bamboo details and is one of my favorite new Ninjago armors. There's only one big problem with it, and it's the same problem that most of these dual molded armor pieces have had for the past few years, and that's that you cannot actually pose your minifigure heads with this mask on. Unfortunately, the mask is built into the armor, which means that you literally cannot turn their heads. It's one of my biggest complaints about the new Dragon's Rising system of interchangeable hoods, and I get it, LEGO has committed to a system for the next few years, but it is so sad when armor pieces like this are kind of wasted for display in my opinion, because I love to pose up my minifigs and move their heads, and you just can't do that with this armor piece. Otherwise though, with the armor removed, it's one of my favorite designs for Zane actually, which is a bit of a shame because it doesn't really appear in the show. The dark tan and dark red is a really nice touch, and I find it really interesting to kind of tie these ninja back to stealth and to really tie them together as a team. All of them have a little bit of dark red integrated into their torsos, and I love the chain tassels as well. Zane, of course, is kind of on a run where he's just been revealing his exposed chest. Like, he's just flaunting it around on every minifigure, so it kind of makes sense. You can see the exposed power core there because for whatever reason he keeps on doing that for his recent minifigs, but I do find that to be like a funny detail, and of course it does tie it very close to Zane being the robot ninja of the team, or the Ninjroid. Moving over to Cole, this is the second copy of Cole we get. We get another version of him in the combo vehicle, but it's actually really well done. He comes with one of those lanterns, which they use to actually see these spectral dragonians right before they suck the souls out of the living, and of course you have some really great armored up detail for Cole himself. He's got the dark tan and dark red factored into the color scheme, much like the rest of the ninja here, but this time he also has some orange details, which is really nice, and I love the armor, kind of like a plate mail sort of style of armor on the center of his chest there, which just looks really cool. He's also got that same tassel, but at a different location this time, and you have a stylized version of the Cole symbol on the back of the armor. Once again, great armor piece, just wish that you could actually have it such that you could remove the mask, because again, it just feels like it's so limiting in its possibilities, and I've already chopped up one of the armor pieces just to be able to showcase what the head looks like underneath, and I hate modifying pieces. I'm a purist in almost every other way, but I love to be able to pose my minifigures and photograph them, so I just had to. Moving on to Nia here, I've chosen to have her wield the reveal blade, which I guess is the first time I'm talking about these on the channel. It's a really nice piece, dual molded in transparent red and gold, which is such a slick color scheme. I also think this is one of Nia's best suits. It's a nice blend between the light azure as well as the gunmetal gray silver coloration, which was introduced for the Ninjago movie, and once again, you have that dark tan and dark red detailing, which just makes the minifigure feel a bit more serious in a sense. It's like the ninja are delving into a darker territory, and I really appreciate that they really tried to make the team feel cohesive without making all the suits feel the same. You have elements that are shared throughout all the suits, but they all stand out as unique for the ninja. Like for instance, the elemental kimono design kind of rippling across the torso there is a really nice touch. You can see kind of like a wave going across the torso. Just once again, really wish that the mask wasn't molded into the armor, because this is a very, very well done armor piece. Moving onwards, we'll take a very quick look at Jay in his rogue alter ego here. This is identical to the minifigure released in the first half of the year, so I don't really have that much to say about this one. The only thing to note is that this time he is using golden dragon nunchuck pieces instead of the black ones, maybe signifying that he has kind of been a part-time member of the ninja team nowadays, and of course you can remove the armor and the mask to showcase a very angry expression underneath, with no alternate expression because of course that would have been visible with the hat. It's a very good minifigure design, and I really love the dark tan components with the fur over his shoulder, the lightning details on the torso, which as we saw in the part 1 mid-season finale, actually lit up as soon as he used his lightning powers. So overall, I'm a big fan of this minifigure. I just wish that in the first half of the year, we at least got an exclusive head to showcase the red goggles which mask his identity, even though it is very, very obvious who it's supposed to be. Moving on to Wildfire, this is again a repeat not just from the first half of this year, but from last year as well. Strangely enough, none of the 2025 sets that include Wildfire include her armor piece, which is very weird. It's a big miss to me. I don't know why they didn't include the armor piece for 2025, other than maybe if they're phasing that piece out or discontinuing it. I don't really have an explanation for that. And then Zarked is Zarked. Zarked appeared in the March wave of Ninjago, and I really like the specialized Japanese hat that he has on. It's a really unique piece. He does have an alternate expression, which I would argue isn't really necessary because most of his face is covered by the hat, but it is what it is, and he does have a slightly longer blade for his chain weapon this time. Altogether, this is my favorite version of the bounty in a long time. It is very hard to complain about a $200 price tag, especially compared to a lot of the very, very expensive and arguably overpriced sets we are getting this year. Over 2,387 pieces for $200 is a really good deal, especially if it includes 2 exclusive minifigures. There are a ton of fabric components and sales. It's just really nicely done. That being said, I will say that there are a few things holding this set back for me to consider it the perfect bounty. One thing is the dragon head, as I talked about ad nauseum. I really am not a big fan of the way they pulled off the dragon head in this particular set, and it just looks so much better as a larger dragon head as we've seen in the animated version of the model, so I don't really understand why they didn't do it for this. It's nice to get a recolor of the newer style of dragon head, but not at the expense of having a really nice figurehead at the front of the bounty. The mechanism to make it fly is really good, but I also wish that these sails had some sort of way to be angled or maybe even folded outwards, sort of similar to how the movie bounty flew in the original animations, which kind of had a similar sail getup, but then allowed the sails to have a very cool mechanism to fold downwards and act as wings. I think it would have been super cool if they attempted that sort of mechanism in this set. I understand it would have required a lot more pieces and probably a lot more fabric as well, and would have bumped the price up significantly, but I would have taken it to have an even cooler transformation feature, because for me, my favorite bounties have historically been the ones with the best transformation features. The final flight of the Destiny's bounty had such a cool function to allow the engines to literally split in half and then angle backwards. Even the latest Legacy bounty had a really cool way to angle the jets backwards and allow front jets to move outwards at the same time. I just feel like this is almost the perfect bounty. The interior is so good, the detailing is amazing, the color scheme is excellent. It's just little things like the fragility, the fact that the front and back sails are mounted on literally just 2 studs. Little things like that just hold it back for me from being my favorite version of the bounty. I think that honor still has to go to either the Legacy one or the movie one. But this is still a very, very worthy set, and it is remarkably good value, especially compared to some other sets in this very wave of Ninjago. And if you don't own a bounty yet, this is the one to get. That's all for this review. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments. I recognize I've been a little bit more critical of this set than most people have been when they first saw images online, but it's my job to give an honest review of the set. Whether or not it's been provided to me for free by LEGO, I want to state my honest opinions, and while I say this is one of my favorite Ninjago sets this year, it definitely isn't perfect, and that's just what I think. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know what you think of the set in the comments down below. Will you be picking this one up or modifying it yourself? That's one thing I really want to see. People trying to modify this to make it even better, because it's so close to being really, really outstanding. And with that, we have summed up our look at the largest set of the wave, the Temple Bounty, and now let's take a closer look at all of the minifigures across the entire wave, taking a look at distribution, my overall thoughts on the figures as a whole, and which ones are my favorites. Alright, at long last, here is our look at every single one of the Summer 2025 LEGO Ninjago minifigures, separated out by heroes versus villains. There are many copies of almost all of the ninja, except for Zane, who is exclusive to one set, as well as copies of the villains themselves. And for the first time, we are getting every single member of the Forbidden Five in one whole wave of sets, even though one of them technically isn't fully complete. This wave introduces the ninja in new Ghost Hunter or Spectral suits, which look absolutely phenomenal, featuring dual-molded golden and primary color-based armor, as well as the introduction of some key side characters like Frack, the Elemental Master of Quake, even a non-canon Master Wu and a Kai Master of Fire minifigure for Ninjago Legends, and then of course the remaining members of the Forbidden Five that we didn't see earlier this year, with the villain faction being the Spectral Dragonians, who are really phenomenally detailed, but unfortunately a little less involved and intricate than their counterparts from earlier this year, and I actually have a few speculations as to why many of them are missing their wings. Now, in terms of minifigure distribution, I actually have a lot to say about it, because, to be honest, I feel like minifigure distribution is one of the weaker parts of this entire wave, and this is going to be very obvious when we jump into the main heroes of the line. Now, if you look at the overall spread of characters, we have 2 copies of Lloyd, 2 copies of Kai, plus an extra one for Legends, 3 copies of Aaron, 3 copies of Jay, although all 3 are technically all different. Again, another 3 copies of Aaron, which are all slightly different, 1 copy of Zane, 3 copies of Wildfire, 2 Coles, 2 Nias, although one of them is missing the armor, 2 copies of Sora, and then finally 1 Frack. On paper, this doesn't seem like that bad of a distribution. After all, we're getting at least 2 copies of all the ninja in most of the sets. The only unfortunate thing, though, is that the placement of these minifigures honestly doesn't really make that much sense to me. For instance, Lloyd and Sora both come in these same sets as a duo. Lloyd's jet mech has Lloyd and Sora as the 2 hero minifigures, and then Ronto the Master Dragon also has Lloyd and Sora as the 2 ninja minifigures, plus Wildfire as well. But that means that as soon as you get one of those 2 sets, you don't really need to get the other to get the different minifigures, or if you get the other ones, they basically just aren't included in those sets. So while we do get 2 copies of Lloyd and Sora, it's weird that they're packaged together in both sets, and it would have been really nice to get a little bit of variety. Even for some of the minifigures where technically technically we do get 2 copies of them like Nia. One of them is in the 4+ set, and as such she is missing her armor piece, which means that technically we only really get 1 copy of Nia and 1 copy of Zane, and they're both exclusive to the most expensive set of the wave, the $200 Temple Bounty. Personally, I would have been a lot happier if they decided to distribute the minifigures in a little bit more of an even way across the expensive and cheaper sets. It's a bit annoying that the most expensive set of the wave technically has 2 exclusive variants of some of the main ninja characters, and even when some of the heroes appear in other sets, they're often missing their armor, retaining the exclusivity of those other characters. Even Rogue J, who appeared in a smaller set earlier this year, if we're just looking at the summer wave, only comes fully armored up in the Temple Bounty. The other set he comes in, which is his own set, the Rogue's Mech Dragon Rider, doesn't feature the armor, which I guess does make sense because the armor doesn't really fit in the mech cockpit, but then you have the same issue with the 4+ set as well, although at least that one has an exclusive hood. All of that is to say is that the distribution of Ninja this wave does feel a little bit uneven. It's weird to get Lloyd and Sora together in 2 sets, and it's also weird to get Nia exclusive to the most expensive set, which unfortunately has happened before in her own season. Nia in her scuba suit was exclusive to the bounty of that wave, and I really miss the days of LEGO just trying to more evenly distribute these figures across all of the sets. Imagine if Ronto the Master Dragon had Nia instead of Sora, or Sora was featured in the Temple Bounty instead. Just swap those 2 minifigures and I feel like a lot of problems could have been solved. But altogether, if you do want to get the entire Ninja team, at a bare minimum, you need to purchase the Temple Bounty for $200, which gets you Zane, Cole, Nia, Jay, and Wildfire. And then you're going to absolutely need to get Lloyd and Sora. So let's say you get the cheaper set, Ronto the Master Dragon, that gives you Lloyd and Sora, but technically you still need Aaron and Kai. So you have to get the $10 set for Kai, and then you need to get the cheapest set that Aaron comes in, which is the Rogue's Mech Dragon Rider for $75. Oh, and if you're counting Frack as part of the main team, which I personally am, you need to get the $100 Ninja Combat Vehicle as well. I almost listed basically all of the sets in the wave. In fact, the only set where technically you don't have to get it to get all the minifigures is the Rogue vs. Drake's Race Car Duel, the 4+ set, and Aaron's Spinjitzu Battle Mech, if you do want the fully armored up versions of all the figures. Otherwise, you're gonna have to get everything else. So it is a little bit unfortunate that way, and I do wish the distribution of these figures was a little bit better, and maybe for future waves LEGO will try to do that, or maybe this is a ploy to make sure that sets are going to sell well if people do want to get the full Ninja team. So it really just goes to show that maybe LEGO actually does know what they're doing here, it's just a bit unfortunate for the consumer. As we actually take a look at the individual suits for the minifigures, I have a couple of thoughts on the way these are set up. Obviously, this is continuing the trend introduced in Dragon's Rising Season 1, which has the mask built into the armor. I've talked about this a lot on videos in the past, but I am not a big fan of this, and the main reason is because I want to be able to pose my minifigures and take photos of them while they're looking in different directions. But you literally cannot turn their heads with this particular armor setup. They have to always be looking perfectly straight forwards, which to me is a major con when it comes to posability. Minifigure heads are meant to turn and move, and it's really unfortunate that this armor setup prevents you from being able to do that. It is the only stain on an otherwise absolutely phenomenal armor piece. I love the dual molding of these armor elements. The dragon head with a visible dual molded eye built in looks fantastic. The bamboo armor in gold on one side as well looks really, really good. I'm a huge fan of how these suits look as a ninja team, but it's just really unfortunate that you cannot turn the characters' heads when they actually have their heads in the suits. I went as far as to custom modify my pieces, which is very rare for me to do. I very rarely will modify, cut, or damage official LEGO pieces, but after I obtained 2 copies of all the minifigures, I felt like I had to do it in order to be able to take fun photos of them outside and in different environments and to really get them posed up. And it felt bad having to cut an official LEGO piece, but because the mask is covering the mouth like that, I felt like I really had no choice, and that was rather unfortunate.
And overall, we have summed up my thoughts on the summer 2025 LEGO Ninjago minifigures. Certainly a very, very interesting spread indeed, and I certainly have a lot of thoughts on the way that some of these minifigures were depicted, and especially the distribution in sets. I really do feel like it would have been a lot better to get 2 copies of the Forbidden 5 across this entire year. Imagine if you had gotten all the sets, you'd have 2 full sets of Forbidden 5, instead of having just 1 copy of Kerr, 1 copy of Rox, and then 3 copies of Drix, 3 Zarks, and 3 Nox. It doesn't make any sense to me why we got that. So that is a little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. Altogether though, I am a fan of the new ninja suits. I think these spectral suits do genuinely look really, really good. They photograph well on display, and they're some of my favorite suits of all time, if not for the fact that the masks are built into their faces, which means you can't turn the heads, and that is a major con for me, especially because, as you can see, I love to go out in the wild and take photos of my minifigures while on vacation, getting them posed up in battles, or going alongside explorations of their own, and you can't really do that if you can't turn the heads. It just looks very static, which is why for the minifigures that I actually had 2 or more copies of, I more than happily cut off the front of the mask just to be able to do that. And now that I actually have 2 copies of every single ninja, I happily chopped off the front mask on all of the ninja themselves. So the next trip I go on, I can actually photograph them in realistic environments, in fun poses, and really get a more dynamic expressionality out of them. It makes not much sense to me as to why LEGO would continue to stick with this design, other than maybe it was a design decision to make it easier for kids to assemble the figures and to swap out different headgear pieces, but I don't know, I'm just not a big fan of us being able to be stuck with just this type of design. That being said, I do genuinely feel that these are some of the strongest minifig designs we've gotten in a long time. The inclusion of dark tan and dark red make them feel like they're part of a team, but also that these suits are very unique. They're navigating treacherous territories, going deep into these spectral lands, and it just makes them feel more unique and special as ninja suits, specialized for one particular mission, but also feeling like they are just standard ninja suits that are part of a team. The villains themselves are also some of my favorite villain factions of all time. The Forbidden 5 are great. I actually think the Dragonians in their regular form from earlier this year ever so slightly edge out the spectral form just for me in particular, and a lot of that is due to the fact that I think that the spectral Dragonians would have looked a lot better if they all had their wings on. Only one of them having wings aside from the main general is so weird to me, so I definitely do think that I would like those a lot better if they were fully armored up, but I also do like the original dark red and gunmetal gray color scheme that we got earlier this year. It feels like those are kind of their own realm that they come from. They feel very fantastical in their design, and so altogether I'm a fan of the Dragonians, but I think the ones from the first half of this year ever so slightly edge them out. The Forbidden 5, however, are some of the most unique villain designs we've gotten in a long time, and I'm kind of shocked we were able to get 5 completely unique minifigures with different torsos, legs, heads, and in some cases exclusive hats for just a single Ninjago year. Oftentimes, Ninjago will maybe give us a couple of different villain designs, like maybe 3 tops, but this entire year we've gotten so many villain designs, all 5 different Forbidden 5, 2 different types of Dragonians, even a slightly different one in the form of Kerr. We are eating good when it comes to villain minifigures this year, and I love the amount of effort that went into depicting them as very menacing creatures. Altogether, I think that summer 2025 is a total triumph when it comes to LEGO minifigures. I like the suits, the dual molding, and the advancements that LEGO has made since the start of Ninjago going on to today are very obvious, and they're very felt and tangible in these figures. It feels like these figures are some of the best minifigures LEGO can make in general, and that's not something I say lightly. In fact, some of the figures almost feel CMF quality in the fact that they have arm printing and dual molded armor and everything. They are incredibly well done. So altogether, I'm a fan of these figures. I'm very excited to see what LEGO Ninjago does going forwards. Obviously, we have seen some image leaks of what's coming, and I can't really talk too much about those, but those certainly look very interesting. I'm quite curious to see where Ninjago's ninja suits are going next, but for these ones, I like them for what they are. Of course, let me know in the comments which ones are your favorites out of all of the characters, out of all the heroes and the villains this wave. Which ones did you like the most? Which ones did you like the least? And that's honestly a good question, because if I had to pick some of my favorites this entire wave, I think Sora's suit is really good. I love the Master Wu outfit, even though it's non-canon, I think it's really solid. If we're talking about the entire year, the rogue design for Jay is super solid, and I also like Kai in his Dragon Hunter suit, or the Ghost Hunter suit as well, with the dragon armor on the side. I think that's really solid. For the Forbidden Five, I like some of them more than others. As I mentioned, I think Kerr is one of the stronger ones. Rox feels unique to me because of the mid-legs, so that one is exciting too. And honestly, just pure design-wise, Noct might actually be like the least interesting one out of all of them, and I still really like Noct's design. I just feel like the other ones have more unique designs that are more key to their characters. Even Zarkt, for his very shoddy performance in the show, has a really intricate design with chains keeping his elemental essence of misfortune in. He feels very unique as a character with the skirt piece as well. All of them feel like their own individual characters, so that's something I appreciate. And of course, getting transparent components on minifigures is always a plus, so those spectral dragonians are really cool. And finally, we have summed up my thoughts on this massive wave of Ninjago. Summer 2025 has definitely been a wave of ups and downs, but I would say the good absolutely outweighs the bad in my opinion. The minifigures are fantastic, so many builds are trying new and innovative things, and we even have a brand new sub-theme of LEGO Ninjago in the form of Legends aimed towards older fans, which honestly for me is a dream come true. There is a lot to love here, and I definitely am a big fan of most of the sets in this wave. I like the diversity of builds where you've got like smaller one-off builds like 2 different motorcycles which can battle each other, you've got another elemental mech, but then you have new and innovative concepts like even the J-Jockey, like having a mech ride a dragon is a really fun concept. Or having something like the transforming jet mech, which absolutely changes the game when it comes to transforming LEGO builds. And of course, you have a beautiful bounty, not perfect as I mentioned in the review, but still very nice, and then those great legend sets. There's a lot to love, and honestly, my least favorite and least interesting vehicle for me is probably the Ninja Combat Vehicle. I just don't really have that much to say about it. Oh yeah, and I guess Ronto as well, which easily is the worst set of the wave. No offense to the designer, I'm sure they were working with the best material they could, but honestly, you do have to wonder how on earth did this get produced as a set. It's not a great build, it doesn't really look anything like the source material. I don't really know if this was designed first, or was it like first made for the show and then the sets. The timing is very strange. So altogether, it's a very weird set. But other than Ronto, which is the standout worst set of the wave, I think everything else is really fantastic about this. I love the builds, I'm absolutely docked into almost every single set, and I am a big fan of seeing where Ninjago might go after this. I think the future has so much potential because they continue to push the boundaries of amazing LEGO builds every year, and that's why I love Ninjago so much. While other themes sometimes are playing catch up with concepts that debuted in places like Ninjago, I feel like Ninjago sets always are trying something new, and it feels like a great testing ground for LEGO to try out new ideas and integrate new play functions, and that's something I love about the theme. That's all for this mega review. Let me know in the comments which sets are your favorites, which ones are you going to be picking up today on August 1st, or are there maybe some you're going to wait for a sale on, and I hope you enjoyed this look at every single one of the summer 2025 LEGO Ninjago sets. That's all for now, thanks so much for tuning in, and be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Bye for now.